All right, welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, October 1st. On the agenda, starting right about now, October 28, 2019, special town meeting warrant and town meeting report. A, to determine the order in which the articles appear, changes, motions, and assignments of articles. B, joint meeting with the Finance Committee on recommendations, and that's it. Right now, could I ask the Vice Chair to lead us on the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, with a brief discussion with town administrator this afternoon, what we'd perfectly like to do is try to go through the order of the articles first, then go through discussions and recommendations, and include the Finance Committee after we set the order. So, Nina?
Thank you. Just going through this somewhat programmatically, the first question before the board is to decide which articles appear in the order in which they appear. So, working off the town meeting report, which you have a printed copy in front of you, and for anyone in the audience, if they'd like a printed copy, there's one on the back, that black stand back there. The most recent version has a red line version, and I emailed it out this afternoon.
Looks like this. I have it.
On the way to copy one, but I'm not sure.
No, is this?
Yes, that's the one. Yep. Just minor changes from the version that was sent yesterday. I wanted to show and track those changes so you knew what they were.
Thank you for outlining it, makes it easier.
Sure. So, going down the list, Article 1. For the most part, we had discussed Article 1 through, I believe, 7 at the last meeting and decided on that order already, in large part. Then we had also discussed Article, what is now Article 9, 10, and 11 as being closer to that end. I did insert Community Preservation Committee in between from the last discussion, which is Article 8. So just quickly, starting on Article 1, that is, and just stop me if you'd like to go in a different direction, but for Article 1, that is a standard article for prior year's bills. At this point in time, we are aware of an elevator bill or several elevator bills that have come in from 2015 and 2016. We've been working with town council to try to address those bills because if they're not paid by a certain time, there's an additional cost to them. Town council has successfully secured an extension for that so we could get through this town meeting and ultimately pay that. But in the meantime, we are also working to understand what happened, how to make sure that this doesn't happen again. These are bills from 2015, 2016. And the school department is also looking into their side because they believe that there may be reasons why they've already done these inspections. Obviously, any information that's gathered will be developed as we go along, and we'll take that into consideration. So Article 1 is broad in its written nature for the warrant, and in the motion is specific, but can be revised if there was a need to do so at a later time. Article 2, I think there have been some numerical changes here, but nothing material since the last time that the board looked at it. We've just modified, making sure that the lines match up. As you can see, there was one error that was picked up by our finance director, which I've incorporated, that I had as an error, which was the bottom right total FY20 net appropriated budget adjustments for the FY 2020 budget adjusted column. If the board has any questions, we can certainly turn to our finance director and ask about the specific items.
That's all.
That's fine.
Article 3 is an item that we had discussed last time. The article and description are new. The article is in the same sentiment as was previously written. I think that the major modification in the article since our last meeting, and not necessarily the red modification, is the fact that temporary construction work was added in based on comments and discussion. Steve Moore had agreed that that would be an important insertion. So not only does it take care of design for interior and exterior repairs that are necessary, but also temporary repairs for this winter. Article 4, nothing material has changed there. Only one number has actually gone down since our last meeting in the permitting software. I think it was previously listed as $45,000 as the revised expenditure limit, but now it's $26,000. Article 5, I don't believe anything material has, I don't think anything has changed here at all. Just the description has been added since the last time we met. Article 6, nothing has changed since the last time we met. The description does include additional language that came up at a departmental meeting today, which was helpful. Article 7, nothing has changed. Nothing material has changed since the last time we met. Article 8, same thing. Article 9 is the amendment to the home rule petition for the sewer district. And I would say for this article, the next two articles, probably special care and attention should be paid by the board as far as the explanation section. I do have a proposed modification for Article 10 for the explanation section once we get to that point. So staying on track, Article 9, this is the point in the town meeting report in which we actually begin listing for the motion as a motion to be made at town meeting, at least for the next few articles. In the case of Article 9, town council is working with Selectman Glavy and others as the group fits, and is working to develop with LELWD, of course, the amended language, which has been discussed at the last Board of Selectmen's meeting, but any minor modifications that are necessary and details that need to be worked out are being worked out as far as the actual text of the home rule petition. This article, as written, is just providing for, I'll call it a placeholder. The motion will be a lot more descriptive, and it will have the language that the Board of Selectmen saw at its most recent meeting, and possibly some minor modifications, or I don't know, Rebecca, if there are any major modifications expected for the home rule petition at this time.
I would hesitate to speak to that. Just, yeah, I think others have been working on it a little more than me, so.
Fair enough. But nevertheless, the motion will be relatively lengthy, and it will include the actual text of the home rule petition, and we will likely need a meeting, if not before the 28th, at town meeting, in advance of town meeting, to iron out this and any other issues that need to be ironed out before the actual meeting itself.
Okay.
Article 10 is the article that provides for a placeholder for any type of borrowing that we'd like to pursue for the sewer article. The description here is basically the description that existed in prior examples. Again, I have a modification to this. At this time, I don't have a number, but hopefully we will have a number at some point in the future, or some other option that the board wishes to move forward with. Article 11, it's my understanding that there has been progress in terms of the property acquisition. It's not at this time specific, nor do I have concrete information, and of course, if the board were to discuss this, it may be in our best interest to discuss it in executive session considering the fact that it may have a negotiation aspect to it. There, in this article, and this gets a little bit, I don't want to say complex, but it gets, yes, yes, sure, no problem. This article, in terms of the procurement requirements for this article, there are some steps that may need to be taken, whether it is to identify land as a unique property acquisition or to go through a request for proposals process at some point. One of those two will need to be met. I know that there is an intention to structure this as a potential way to give notice to town meeting, which is what Selectman Glavy has shared with me on this article, but I think this needs to be developed further. For Article 12, there has been some language change to this article, and I would defer to Nick Lawler, the General Manager of LELWD, who's here today, with any questions on this one. Article 13, as part of our process tonight, the board will be asked to decide on one of the options between option 1, option 2, and option 3. Option 1 is basically written in such a way that it's not subject to a debt exclusion. Option 2 is written in such a way consistent with what Selectman Gerbig had mentioned at the last meeting regarding having an optional debt exclusion vote. In other words, town meeting votes on the article, the project is approved, but then voters are allowed to decide whether it's within the levy or outside the levy. And then option 3 is one that is actually subject to a debt exclusion vote. Article 14 hasn't changed since we last discussed this subject. The only change in this process with the classification and compensation study is that we have received a copy, the submissions by firms for the classification and compensation study. They haven't been opened, and when they are opened, it will take time before we actually have the price proposals, because we have to go through a process of evaluating the non-price proposals and then incorporating the price proposals after the evaluation of the non-price proposals has been completed. And therefore, by the time of printing this, as of Thursday, we won't have a number because it will not have yet been evaluated. The personnel board will be doing the non-price proposal evaluation, and then the chief procurement officer will be doing, which is our finance director, will be doing the price proposal portion of it, which is how it's kind of spelled out through the general laws. Article 15 is personnel bylaw amendments. Nothing has materially changed here since we last met. There was some comment at today's department meeting that caused us to insert a couple of different words in the second part, where it clarifies or revises the definition of personnel days to insert benefit eligible after the words part-time, which was a good catch by one of our employees. And then Article 16 has not materially changed or at all changed since we last met. And of course, the last one is the zoning voter petition, which we cannot change. Yes, please.
That one sentence got added to the firearms dealer bylaw.
Yes, but didn't you say I had accepted that actually, I don't know when that.
I think it might be new to the
Might be
board,
new? Okay.
So I just want to bring it to their attention.
Okay. Which is, you know, off the top of your,
Yeah, here, sure.
Article 16.
Article 16, yes.
Sure.
Thank you.
Hi, Rebecca Lacey from Town Council's office. We did, just in working with the chief of police, looking again at this proposed bylaw regarding licensing for firearms dealers. In speaking with him, we decided it made sense to add a sentence to the last paragraph of the proposed bylaw applying these fees to existing licensees, because, the idea is the town is trying to recoup its significant costs of having the police officers conduct these annual inspections, and so it only seemed fair to also make existing licensees, as they come up for needing their annual inspection, to have to pay that same fee. So that's the change.
Right.
So at this point, the question is, again, how would the board like to order the articles, and does the board wish to place all or a portion of the articles that are presented? Of course, I would recommend that at a minimum, the voter petition be placed on the warrant.
I would propose we just go the order that you presented.
Yeah. I don't have any concerns with the order.
There was a comment that was made at the department meeting that with the timing and our bylaws where a special article, an article can't come up after 10:30 PM, the consideration of some of the lengthier articles may be better placed earlier in the session. But that's just me relaying information that came up at our meeting. Certainly the board's discretion how you want to handle the order of the articles.
In my opinion, if it gets to be that lengthy and it's 10:30, then we can have those articles go to Tuesday.
Yeah, I think that can we be proactive and place articles on Tuesday, or do we play them all out and see if?
I don't think we've ever, I can't remember ever doing
I just don't want to
that.
get into a situation where we get to, 10:30 and Tim makes a judgment call and goes against his own policy to, I think we can get this done
To
in the
keep
next.
going.
Pardon me?
Right, like the last town meeting.
Yeah, we end up there till 1 o'clock in the morning, and
But
you don't necessarily.
that's done at the will of
Deliberation.
those at town meeting.
Right.
Right, so my ask is whether or not, if we fear that may be the case, would it warrant us making a decision to, in fact, can we go to Tuesday without it going into overtime, if you will? Or are we better suited to let people know that Article, XX, XX, and XX are going to be heard on Tuesday? So that those folks that want to be there for that article aren't waiting around until 10:30, 11 o'clock to make the determination.
So I don't want to advise this too off the cuff, but I believe that you could sort of suggest that that's the intended order, but ultimately it is up to town meeting, which articles, in what order to take articles and so forth. So I just want to make sure that you don't surprise people by, saying an article is going to be
Heard on Tuesday.
heard on Tuesday, and then for whatever reason, town meeting votes to hear it on Monday. So that's my
Right.
only concern.
Right, I appreciate that. And that's not at all, and I wouldn't expect that we would do that, but I
Yep.
just didn't know if we were within our right to potentially hear something on Tuesday, even though it's posted for Monday. Tuesday is our default overflow or
Once again, I go with the order that we have here and suggest to the town moderator that if there's an important article that is right at 10:30, then we go to Tuesday and let it stand at that.
I'm okay with the order we have.
Certainly, the moderator has exercised his prerogative in the past to reorder articles contrary to our wishes anyway, so,
Which is his prerogative.
which is his prerogative.
So, we can make a motion.
Let me get that up on the screen.
This is incumbent upon us actually placing the articles on the warrant, right?
Yes.
I have it in front of me, you want to just read it?
Perfect.
Look at it, A.
Yes.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the order in which the articles appear on the October 28th, 2019 special town meeting warrant,
Pause. And place each article.
and place each article as presented / modified. Authorize town council and the town administrator to jointly make any necessary clerical changes to the warrant, and to direct that the constable post said warrant.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? All right.
It's your amendment, just include.
Thank you. Yeah, that's
Appreciate
perfect.
that.
Now, Nina, are we gonna go through each article and Get feedback from FinCom or?
Certainly.
A point. The microphones are for the use of our outside audience. If you don't bring it closer to where you are, it won't be picked up with the TV signal. That's why we have them there. So if you move a little closer so that the TV audience will be able to hear what we're saying. Thank you.
Was that FinCom?
I'm done.
Okay. Which capacity were you acting in?
That's all we got, we're out of here.
Oh, that's us.
Now, does the board want to go article by article and ask for feedback from FinCom at that point? Or Mr. Chair and Finn, how would you like to progress also?
Sure, if we come to one that we've already voted on, we did vote last week on articles, I'll mention that we voted.
Sounds good. Sounds good. We did incorporate the ones we knew you had voted, and then if there were changes,
Okay.
we didn't incorporate that into the town meeting warrant.
You know, we'll just vote each article.
Yeah, however. So one of the next decisions that, I mean, we can certainly go article by article, but, and if we go article by article, we'll eventually get to the library article, and we'll make the decision on whether we're gonna go with option 1, 2, or 3. For the purposes of the slide, I had that next. If you wanna go starting at Article 1, we can certainly do that. The only other consideration is that, and, well, you're posted for 7 o'clock, correct? So,
My other consideration would be the one that has to do with light and water, and Nick,
yep.
if we could get his done, he could leave and go home. He has the distance to travel.
Maybe
And
let's
there might
start
not be any
there.
comments on it anyway, but.
Let's start there, perhaps go back to the library article, and then I just have a minor, what I believe to be a minor change in the sewer description article. So starting with Article 12, which is the water article. Thanks for coming in.
This is gonna upset Chairman Carr, 'cause he told me you made him wait for 2 hours last week. So I appreciate it.
And he'd be waiting 2 hours tonight if he were here with you.
I told him to stay home.
Nick, would you mind also touching on the changes in the article since the last time that the article was written?
Sure. So, I think Dave Ketchin and Jim did a pretty good job kind of laying out what the intent of the article was. This issue is very fluid for us. Right now, we're in talks with CDM on how to handle this issue. So we had a conversation today, and I think we're getting closer to a permanent solution. But I just don't want to come up with a permanent solution, which will have the answers by fall town meeting, and then be hamstrung by the town meeting article. And one of our thoughts is potentially to tie the two sources together at Spec Pond and Whitcomb. And the expense for temporary treatment for PFAS for 1 year is about $1.5 million. And it's gonna be a multiple year issue potentially. So if there's a way for us to, instead of doing temporary Band-Aids every year, to start making strides towards permanent solutions, we'd much rather spend that money on permanent fixes. So that $6 million is hoped to be enough to cover any temporary treatment needed at Spec Pond. We can't just, right now, that source is offline for the moment. Obviously, if there was a fire or a need for water, we'd have to bring it back online. But that would install temporary treatment at Spec Pond. It would allow us to design a permanent solution. And it would also allow us to start hopefully making some good headway in installing transmission main between those two plants. We don't have those numbers final yet, but $6 million would be enough to get us going. I'm sure in the spring we'll be back with more parts to the solution to the problem.
Would it be appropriate to handle this article the way that a couple of these other ones have been handled, which is to take the $6 million out and rather say to appropriate a sum to pay costs of installing ... and if you'll have a number between now and then, just like we've got for a couple of these other articles, the motion on the floor will include the dollar value. The explanation here would need to be clarified or added to state
Yeah, I
that
mean,
there'll be a defined dollar value.
sure, I mean,
But then, if it ends up at 6.3 million,
yeah,
you don't have your hands tied.
that's great. I mean, I think the more time that we can get close to this fall town meeting, the more answers we'll have. We have an engineering workshop with CDM on the 22nd, for 3 hours, that they're gonna go over all these issues and solutions with us. So I'm pretty confident by fall town meeting, we'll have concrete direction on which way to go. So Chase, if we go with your approach, when do you need that number by?
I mean, I would think we would want it as soon as possible, right, to inform the public, but at least me personally, I think what I hear across the board regularly is we value certainty above expediency.
Yeah. And I gave Nina the layman's description about half an hour ago, so, we can allude to what we think the number's gonna be in that, so the public knows. We're not trying to hide what the cost is.
Right. I mean, and this is just, I don't mean to speak for my colleagues, I just see that as a reasonable course forward if you think you'll have a more defined number in a couple of weeks' time.
But for the printing of the thing that goes out to the townspeople and the voters, what would you put in that, to be determined?
I mean, like Nick alluded to, I would put, the current anticipated or estimated cost is approximately $6 million, prior to town meeting. That'll be refined through, define the process.
There'll be a page insert for.
Right, and the motion at town meeting will be amended to include the number based on the evolution between,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna need access to borrowing authorization for some amount of money relatively quickly. So how we can get there?
So you came up with the $6 million. I mean, you didn't pull that out of your.
No, so the original was 2.5 million, and that's what CDM had given us for what they thought would be temporary treatment for the year, and design criteria and cost for a permanent solution. And I was thinking maybe $3.5 million would get us going on that transmission main, was where the 6 million came from. Now, I'm not, that type of engineer that knows those costs 100%, so, on the transmission main, so that's an educated guess. CDM, if that's part of the solution, they're gonna have those numbers there.
Yeah, I do like having the number.
We could just say at the time of printing, the cost of this project was 6 million, and then just add language in there that there is the likelihood that that figure will be supplemented prior to town meeting. We could
We're in joint session, right?
say something like that.
Have you opened yours?
You open 7 o'clock?
We're open.
We're open.
You just did. Thank you.
Greg from Finance, did you have a
Yeah, I mean, my point was, and you kind of alluded to it, Nick, is what we looked at last week was 2.5 million, and it's gone up to 6 million, and we're still not sure that number's accurate, right?
Well, I'll spend 6 million, it's just a question of, is that gonna be enough? I mean, this is, and I think Chairman Knox alluded to this is a very serious issue that we're facing as a water department, and it's gonna involve, lots of changes and upgrades to our facilities. Spec pond treatment plant, is aging, so it's over, about 25 years old. Any temporary solution we do at spec pond is good money after that. So this is really just the beginning of kind of solving this national crisis that's going on.
And I think it's, like you said, Nick, it's good to point out to the public that this isn't a Littleton issue by itself. It is something that's statewide and.
It's national.
It's now national.
And, another thing I should mention, there's potential we don't have to utilize any of it. Myself and Corey Godfrey met this morning. I'm gonna botch her name, so I'm glad she's not here, but with Katie Theoharides, who's the new Secretary of Energy for EEA. And this is on their radar for an issue for all the communities in the Commonwealth. Water departments are already struggling to maintain and upgrade an 100-year-old infrastructure, which you guys know, we've been on front of you several times now trying to replace our infrastructure. This is an additional cost that it's not fair for the ratepayers to keep, bearing the cost of this burden. And she is aware of that. Governor Baker released some funding, or is in the process of releasing funding for testing. We've already tested, our wells voluntarily. But there's gonna be funding available. And the secretary mentioned even potential legal action against some of the chemical companies, which other states have already done. And these chemical companies seem to be settling pretty quickly. They've known about this problem going back to the 70s and 80s. They just weren't forthright with communication.
Mr. Chair?
Just, Nick, so this, through the chair, please, if this is this is due specifically to, we believe, the Devons, the plume, is that?
No.
This has nothing to.
I mean, it's a similar situation, but this isn't tied to the
Okay,
Devons.
so, I think Fred and I were talking about it earlier about, so you're referencing grants that could be available federally. Now, those don't particularly come in after we do the repairs, correct? They would have to come before. Is that?
Well, I mean, I was talking about grants that were Commonwealth grants.
Oh, okay. Not federal, not from the federal side.
Who knows how long that's gonna be.
I mean, I'll tell you from where I stand, we don't see a lot of federal money coming in to address this. Frankly, the federal government has been dragging their feet on handling PFAS to the point that even toxicological profiles have been stalled and slowed down. So this is something that really states and private parties are leading the charge on. And New England in particular is leading the charge on it. So the state level has been active. New Hampshire has been incredibly active. Vermont has been incredibly active. Massachusetts, frankly, relative to them, is playing catch up.
Yeah, New Hampshire and Vermont have already filed legal action against chemical companies.
Any other questions?
I mean, I don't disagree with Chase's approach, but I think that having a number, if you feel as though that $6 million number is the number, and that would kind of get you through, and then you'd come back in May and you'd have a better understanding of what else you'd need. I think that's part of the presentation at town meeting, saying, we need $6 million now, but it's in all likelihood, we will be back in May, and then we'll know what the rest of that nut would be.
Hopefully I can come back and say we got funding elsewhere and we can not use that authorization, would be great,
That'd be awesome, yeah.
but, we'll see.
So I just.
And Con, did you have a question?
Certainty.
Yeah, I think that there's some language that might sort of cover both sides here. See, to appropriate approximately $6 million, and then in parentheses, with the final number to be presented by the water department at town meeting, close parentheses. Just, I mean,
fine.
that way you get your number, but we also say it's, because having these three large articles with no numbers out there,
Agreed.
we're gonna get our heads handed to us in town meeting by the voters, and I can see that, why they would be upset. So I think having a number there that sort of approximates it, it's bigger than the bread box. So people should be at least tuned to that number, and if it's 6.5, or it's 5.5, or it's 7, that's because they've done their due diligence between now and town meeting. So that's what I would suggest we do.
That's fine.
And it's important to mention this is coming from water rates, which is slightly different than the other acts are coming from. I know it's the same people and businesses in the end, but it's a different part.
And you need that 2/3 vote here because it could potentially be a borrowing article, or could potentially be a borrowing
Yeah,
source?
both parts of the article need 2/3 vote. But yeah,
Oh,
the borrowing
right.
authorization,
Second
and, yeah, the Article 97.
Two parts of that question. One is,
This is
Okay, so what's next?
I think with that amendment,
Yeah, that covers it.
with
Yeah,
Rebecca's
I like
amendment.
that.
Not my amendment.
Fred did a nice job. Fred did a great job on that wording.
Wordsmithing over there.
I think we're all set.
Okay.
Need to do anything else tonight, or?
Should we go over the proposed description at this point? Just, it's on the screen. Does the board, as the board, with Nick here before he leaves, does the board want to modify it in any way?
I think he has his own board. Frankly, I feel as though if your board is okay with the description on there, I don't think it's our place to, just like if the school committee was coming forward with something. I
Yeah,
don't
and this
think
is,
it'd be our
and this
place.
is consistent with our public messaging that's gonna start coming out over the next couple of weeks. That's where this came from.
The only language that would change is for the next steps sentence in conjunction with the recommended language from town council.
Yeah, instead of up to, maybe put approximately.
Yeah.
And then parenthetically,
Yeah.
That,
final number.
second to last sentence needs work in the first paragraph, given that there are no federal or state standards.
Well, the state does have a
The ones
guideline.
Yeah.
I don't know, if-
They consider those standards. There's no MCL. And there's federal standards for sure. There's no EPA standards? What's a 70 parts per trillion?
It's a guidance value.
Right, but I think they would consider that as a standard.
well, we can work the language.
Yep.
Wish I could operate in guidance values.
When I was at a meeting, I was told it was the EPA.
Yeah, they'll tell you what's the standard. I like Jason's approach. That sounds a lot better.
It's their guidance numbers right now. To be clear, the reason that I think it's important to specify that they're guidance values is that the ultimate promulgated standards could be lower than the current guidance values. And so to say that we're currently meeting the standards this is a very, very subtle thing, but could come back to haunt us, given that they are guidance values, and standards could be lower than those guidance values.
We're expected to be lower than that.
Depends on who you ask.
So would a quick and easy change to the language be the levels are below the current federal and state guidance? Or guidelines, rather?
Guidelines, sure.
Comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'd like to run that by Cory Broccoli first, just to make sure, but I don't foresee an issue.
And I feel as though that's in their warehouse, so I'm okay if they make final edits, which is.
Yeah, and if you guys ultimately decide standards is a better word, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we want to vote?
Do we need to insert right now?
No, just didn't know if you wanted to take a position on it. Want to do that all at the end?
No, we can do it now. Let's get it done.
Okay, let's do it.
Chase. Drop that down
Oh,
a couple degrees.
sorry.
Like,
Was looking at the current standards. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote, we're just doing.
Just
13,
one,
right?
yeah.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to support Article 12 in the October 28th special town meeting.
hold on.
As modified.
As modified.
Alan, do you have a question?
I have a question. Reading the article, again, it's another one of those articles written that asks two questions, not one. It says, will the town vote to appropriate $6 million? And then it asks to determine, the town determine whether it should be raised by taxation, transfer of available funds, borrowing, or otherwise provided. So if you vote yes now, what are you saying? Are you providing a way
What funding source?
to fund it?
The funding source is user fees, correct?
Yeah, so that part came from town council, but this comes from water rates.
So, I mean, in the end, the motion is gonna need to be specific as to whether it's And I don't believe in any way, perhaps the best thing for us to do is strike the words "be raised by taxation," but perhaps leave in transfer from available funds if there's any scenario where the water department is going to utilize enterprise funds to offset some of the costs, and borrowing. I would leave those words unless we're certain it's just going to be borrowing, in which case we can narrow it down to just borrowing.
I mean, it could be both. I mean, that came from town council. If the town wants to use taxes to pay for it, that's great. But it was our intention to use water rates. I mean, that's how we fund all of our projects.
Okay.
So perhaps there should be a second, and then we should revise the motion to strike the words "raised by taxation."
Second.
Move to amend the motion to strike the words raised by taxation in my original motion.
Second.
Yeah, I have one question before you go forward with that. Are we going with what Fred is proposing for the $6 million around that amount? Or are we gonna just stick with the $6 million that's on here? And then on town meeting floor, if Nick needs more, he will ask for more at that time.
The motion that I made was utilizing the language that Fred had proposed, the about 6 million to be specified at town meeting.
Right, and we'll put whatever number Nick comes up with will be read into the article on town meeting floor. I mean, that's what it would be. But all this does is it tells people it's more than $1 million, it's more than $2 million, it's more than $3 million, it's a lot of money.
And we don't have any concerns as a committee if it's 8 million or 9 million?
And we're gonna
Just
have.
throwing it out
we're
there,
gonna vote it.
because that's
We're gonna have-
around 6 million.
We're gonna do that.
I guess my only concern is we voted last week on 2.5, and here we are a week later, we're at 6, around 6. I don't get the warm and fuzzies here that we've got this number nailed down, and I'd feel more comfortable voting on a nailed down number. And if you need more, just ask for it on town meeting floor.
I mean, the reality is that if the article were to be worded in such a way that it said $6 million, it's likely, and I'll defer to town council, it's likely that the moderator would say you can't go above that number. That is how,
Outside the four corners.
that's outside the four corners of the article. So the word approximately leaves that open to allow for it to be 6.5, as was referenced earlier. The other alternative is to remove the number altogether and have it not included in the article and put it in the explanation section, which would be in similar format to what has been presented for the library project, as an example.
I'd just like to know what we're voting on from a dollar perspective, that's all. It just feels like, because it's moved around a couple times already, it doesn't feel comfortable to me.
Well, the scope of work's changed quite a bit too. So that 2.5 million, nothing's changed from that 2.5 million. That was for design and temporary treatment. And like I said, it's our thought, why keep on spending temporary money year after year at a plant that's near end of life? If we could start working on some of our permanent solutions. And this would allow us to start working on permanent solutions, some of the permanent solutions.
No, I get what you're trying to do, that's not.
Yeah,
not-
well,
I'm just-
that's why the number
If
changed.
we're voting on a dollar amount, I feel more comfortable from a finance perspective that we're voting on a true dollar amount versus a sum up somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Just my one person's opinion.
But Greg, I mean, Mr. Chairman, you're okay with, if we're going to get a final dollar amount
Yeah,
for town?
yeah.
You just prefer to have it be 6 million a year?
Or at least that's what we're voting on here, and if it needs to change, it changes.
In other words, if it's 6.1, nobody gets their heart broken. If it's
No,
12,
not at all.
you don't want your vote in support of it thrown back in your face.
Exactly. It just doesn't look like we're organized.
Which is why we post prior to town meeting to be able to, to address anything that we need to address, right?
Correct.
Okay, we have a motion for an amendment to strike out the taxation part. And a second, all those in favor of the amendment? Now on the article itself, we did have a motion.
Now it's as amended.
It's amended.
Second.
Did you just say?
Just did.
Motion's been made and second, all those in favor? Aye. Thank you.
So just so I'm certain I understand,
That'll make one of us.
We voted to insert the word approximately as written by, as read out loud by Fred Faulkner, and also strike the words raised by taxation,
Yes.
correct?
Approximately, and the other language.
That
Yes.
was
To
constructed.
appropriate approximately $6 million with the final number to be presented by the Water Department at town meeting.
Correct.
The one thing I will note in part of this discussion is, we are going to need sheets that have typically come in a different color. Last year, I guess it was a yellow sheet that was handed out for modifications or motions. This year, it's gonna be a green sheet. It's a green year. We probably need a meeting to finalize that sheet and finalize the language on that sheet before town meeting, so it can go and be printed and so on and so forth. It would be that, by that day, where we would need information from the water department, information from the library, and so on and so forth, that we need to consider probably as days get closer. So we need to set a deadline for that. I don't know if that's how it's been done historically, but.
I don't remember having that meeting in the past. Can we defer to Steve, maybe?
I mean, I don't think the changes have been as substantial as potentially this year either.
I mean, if you think about the home rule petition, for instance, if there are any material changes since you last met, I don't know as though it would be something I could just put on a piece of paper and pass out at town meeting. That would be difficult.
Steve, how have we done that historically? Has it been produced by FinCom, has it been produced by,
Historically, you haven't done that, but I don't think we've had a level of motions that are coming new with the dollar amounts that are as substantial as they are.
This is very unusual.
okay, so it would behoove us to have a joint meeting, frankly.
Perhaps. So we'll have to set that up.
They'll set that up.
That also gets to Greg's point too. At that point, we'll know the number, and that gives FinCom an opportunity to say, whoa, we're not cool with 12 million.
Right. Yeah, I think that was my point from the get-go.
Greg's not cool.
I just don't want to put my stamp on something that changes drastically afterwards, that's
Don't
all.
worry about it.
Waters.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You
Nick.
want to go where from here?
13.
Nick, you have anything to offer us relative to any of the sewer articles? Or is that more of a,
So I mean, I'm part of the community as much as anybody, so if you understand. So call.
So on to sewer?
Yeah.
Our meeting, town meeting, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if Nick stayed. I hate to,
I think you may provide some insight that we don't otherwise have in the room.
right.
So then Article 9 or 10?
Almost.
Sorry, man. There's traffic on 495, I'm just helping you. Yeah?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Before we leave that topic, if we're going to set a joint meeting, how much time do you need to print? So we can tell
That's just a
people
week
they
prior.
need to be back with a drop dead date for numbers? So people aren't walking in half hour before town meeting and want us to vote
With
on
Post-it notes?
it like we normally do. In their own green sheets.
BYO, GS.
Yeah, bring your own green sheet.
And the magic marker.
If I may, through the chair, can we finish going through them, Fred, maybe, and then we'll decide on the timeline?
Whatever.
Because
As long as you decide before we leave here, because whoever's putting numbers together needs to know how much they have to scramble, that's all.
Yeah, right, yeah, I mean, that would be my preference, maybe just go through, because we do have a number of articles here that don't have a concrete number associated with them, so maybe go through those first and then.
Identify which ones we need information from,
Yeah.
and then we can relay that information to.
Right.
Steve?
That would be my preference.
Mr. Chairman, I was talking to our OPM on the library today, and our strategy is going to be to try to get a price from the contractor by the 24th, which is a Thursday. We will have the independent cost estimate by the 21st. But the way that we've structured the RFP response is that we will give that cost estimate to the contractor and ask the contractor to give us his proposal based on 70% design by the 24th. So I don't know if that is a consideration.
Okay, let's go back to the sewer article.
Would that be, sorry, would that be close of business on the 24th?
I guess so.
It's a pretty quick turn on a cost estimate there.
It would be very
I would
quick.
think they're gonna want every minute they can get.
Well, we can dictate that though, right?
We also want every minute we can get, because if
Right.
we're printing 5 pages by 750 times, the 25th would leave us 1 business day. So that's very tight. But, I mean, we'll make whatever has to happen.
Not
It's
gonna show
just,
the tech.
perhaps, yeah, that's a good idea.
Well, that could be a separate page.
Yeah, we can talk about that at Kelly.
Yeah, that's,
So we're jumping around here.
right.
Okay, we're back to Article 9, 10, and 11.
I don't think we had any issue with 9, right?
Yeah, I don't see any issues with 9.
Right.
9's just a home rule petition.
Right.
Article 10, I'd just like to show you the proposed additions to the description on the screen. So after the words, in the first line, it says Article 10 would increase the amount authorized, insert the words to be borrowed. And then after the end of the first sentence, insert the words, insert a sentence, debt and interest costs will be the responsibility of the town until such time that the enterprise is self-sustaining. I think that really clarifies the details of this proposal.
I think that's an important clarification.
Thank you to our new finance director.
She's all right. It says 106 in there.
Yeah, did you put on the AC?
I thought I did. I pushed buttons to make it look like I was doing something.
Right.
Your seal coat off.
Stop yelling at me, Betsy. I have feelings, you know.
What is the, what is the funding source for this article?
Which one?
Well,
10?
ultimately,
Ten.
the funding source will be the enterprise fund. That's in part the significance of that edit in there, that an interest cost would be the responsibility of the town until such time that the enterprise is self-sustaining. So the initial guarantor of it is the town.
Okay,
The long-term guarantor of it is the enterprise itself.
okay.
So we'd have to fund the enterprise until it was up and running.
And
So
then,
we'd have to-
and then
So where does that come from? Within the levy?
right now, I was hoping Paul was gonna be here, because he's been pushing the ball forward on the actual numbers on this. I mean, right now, the 2.2 is fully funded. The rest of it depends on what that number is.
236, I think was the.
So to clarify, so we don't have a number for Article 10, and right now it looks like it's being proposed to be funded inside the levy, but we don't know what that number is, so we don't know that that's feasible. Is that correct?
Sounds logical.
So Paul was working with Chris and I on this. And these just came in, I sent to Nina maybe 15 minutes before we came today, so she wasn't able to see them. Chase, I think I sent to you too. With Chris, as we worked at the numbers, he finally got Weston and Sampson's financial spreadsheet unlocked. They locked it on him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the funds in that?
So this, Chris looked at a couple different options, but this one here looks at the total cost of design and construction of a wastewater treatment plant. It looks at all the horizontal piping in the ground that's needed. It looks at the reuse water, which is a piece that could stay or maybe not stay. That was a key part from what you guys had wanted as part of that project. But what this does is it takes out the quirk piece of the project. And the way Chris decides it, at any point in time, that piece could be added. It's modular. So it was kind of our thought that if we were gonna, start, down this road, why add in that type of the project if we don't know yet if it's financially sustainable? Now, an engineering would tell us that, so we're not saying it's definitely out from the beginning. But this number here is what would be estimated, the 25.5 million to build the project, to get sewer in the common, including the plant, including the horizontal design. Now, again, the plant hasn't been designed, so that part of the number could change. But there's some pieces in here that are pretty well set according to Weston and Sampson. We had, and I know, again, Nina, I think, updated you on this at the last meeting, but we had a call with MassWorks a couple weeks ago. We got $1.5 million grant from MassWorks. The Board of Selectmen got that. They're not too picky on how we move forward to get that $1.5 million. They don't really care how much we go to town meeting with and get funded. They recommended at least get the horizontal piece funded, because that's closer to final design. But, we need to expend, I think it was about $650,000 of that grant by the end of this fiscal year to receive that grant. So there should be some funding piece moving forward if we care about that MassWorks grant.
And when you said the horizontal piece, you mean particularly the collection system?
The collection system, right. So that's that was about 24 hours of catching up with Chris. So Chase, you've had a lot more time on it, hopefully.
No, that's consistent with my expectation. I know the board is not gonna like this option, but I think we need to have, with these, a more comprehensive discussion about how much we want to go forward with at town meeting right now. I would say that the minimum amount is enough to get the collection system, to begin the collection system and utilize the MassWorks money. So that's the bottom end. The top end is 26 million. But that 26 million is also something that, in the grand scheme of the project, isn't anticipated to be spent right away anyway. I mean, if you guys recall, the project is phased over time. There would be significant amounts of that money, even significant amounts of the collection system, that would come in phase two. Phase two being 4 years off, plus or minus, 5 years off. So my recommendation is that I think we all need to digest this before we sit here and decide which number goes in the warrant. And I understand the complicated position that puts us in of putting an article on the warrant without a number. But I would rather have a reasoned discussion about what that number should be than picking one of these off this menu. Or some sum.
Right. So here's, Mr. Chair, if I may. So here's my concern, my position. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 articles, sizable articles, that we're proposing to fund. We've had discussions about funding them inside the levy. But we don't have those exact figures. These are all moving numbers, so to speak. So I don't know how we digest this and formulate this and move forward, but it's just not making sense to me. At this point, Because we only have so much room inside the levee. And so if you total all of these up, once maybe at the end of this discussion, it could be, we might have to look at a strong look at our financial policies and what we've been told since I can look back to 2014 about advice from our finance team. So I'd like to look at these articles inclusively, if the board would just engage me or with this discussion. Then maybe just go through them one by one. I don't know, Mr. Chair of FinCom, if you have any thoughts about the process, or?
We probably have a lot to say about it, but I think, this is my first time seeing this number, so we were looking at the 22.2. Now I see it leads us down a road of a $25 million number that we haven't even discussed as a board yet. This puts us in a really tough spot as a board even to vote. But I think we should as a board, but I don't know how we can recommend an article that, I'm looking at a $25 million number and we have no idea what we're asking for exactly later in the month. Is 2.2, is that?
Well, 2.2 has already been funded, so to be clear, the 25 is the number plus or minus $1 million, right? At this point, $1 million or $2 million is a rounding error in this project. That's approximately the number that we had in hand when we talked about funding the 2.2 for the design. So the order of magnitude of that number shouldn't surprise anybody.
So this is without the quirk. Now, just to help me out understand this, because it's the first time I've seen this thing, what's the WWTF?
Wastewater treatment facility. Wastewater treatment facility.
So that's the quirk. So that is,
Yeah,
we're using it as
It's
part of
on
the quirk, potentially, that we.
yeah,
could have a
these
quirk.
headings came from Weston and Sampson's models. So
Okay.
disregard quirks, it's not a quirk.
Okay,
It's a
that
wastewater
was the-
treatment facility.
I would guess that does have the
Ability.
water reuse component of it.
It does.
But not the anaerobic digester. This is the first time I've seen this too, Gary, but I think the AD is anaerobic digester. If you go 2 lines down. ER. I'm not sure what ER is.
Energy
I
reuse.
think we've got two issues here.
Energy reuse.
Looking at the $25.5 million, it's not, obviously we just got this, but it's not spelled out here in this article. I think we need to be transparent with the folks at town meeting to say this is going to be $25.5 million. Whatever that ask is on town meeting floor, whether it's 2 million or 3, whatever the number is. The whole project is going to be $25.5 million, and we owe it to the townspeople to let them know that that's what we're eventually going to get to, whether we go down that road or not.
And to know that it's a betterment project, so this entire project has to go under the levy,
Correct.
Right.
right? So,
I just wish Mr. Glady was here, because he sent me a note that said he was gonna send over a memo to explain things.
Yeah.
I got this at 5:15, and the finances are better than they were a year ago, it's straightforward. Chris Stoddard's been reviewing it, but I never got any memo.
yeah, this isn't really about having the common sewer. I think that ship has sailed. Why it's feasible and why we would need it. It's just, I think that speaks nothing to this.
Yeah.
Unless someone's going to stand up and let the town know, voting for this means this at the end.
Well, I
That's
would
very
hope
important.
that that's not the first time the town has heard that message.
Right.
We've tried to be really clear about, even when we came forward with the 2.2 for design, that's the first step in the number.
Yeah, but we never knew what that number, that final number was going to be.
We never
This
did.
is the first time we're hearing 25.
That's been mentioned in the past many times.
25 to 30 million has been the number.
Right, but I was told it was we're gonna do like a half system, a quarter system, and so I'm sitting here thinking, all right, 12 million probably then. So that number's surprising to me, but I
Right.
haven't been at all the meetings, the sewer meetings, shame on me.
Right.
So I didn't get a lot of that
Well-
information, but regardless, this right here, it's just, I don't have a problem with this article per se, it's just letting everybody know where that we're headed on this, that's all.
And it has to be inside the levy.
And what, we were gonna talk a little bit about the MOU as well, because we never really talked about the MOU as a finance committee, we weren't part of that discussion. There is, it's very specific in there that there's no, here it's a little more gentle when it talks about it's not costing the taxpayers. But it's a little misleading to me, and so I think we have to make sure that we're putting in there that X% of what we know right now is going to be municipal buildings, the schools, so that is costing the taxpayers, because we're the ones that are hooking up that betterment to our own building, so all of that
User
is.
fees.
So it's just, I think it's a very confusing article. I don't want it to get voted down because people don't know exactly what they're voting for. So I just hope there's a presentation that talks to it a little bit, if nothing else, because it's, and I know.
That's why my argument is, just like you, this is the first I've seen this as well. I think we have to go forward as far as what's printed in the warrant with what's written in Article 10 right now, as broad as it is. If we want to amend the language to make sure that folks know that this is on the order of, the total project cost is on the order of 25 million, 100% agree. And we've tried to be very clear about that. I think it would be a mistake right now to specify what that number is.
Okay.
But I think it would also be a grave mistake to come to town meeting without that fully pinned down.
Mr. Sanders?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern and argument about this amount here, at the last time meeting, he did bring up the fact that it was around $25 million when they asked for the 2.2 million. And I drilled and he said, some lady asked a question about the fact of, what about the overrun? He said, well, there's a contingency already in there. And I got up and told him, I said, well, you haven't been truthful with the people in saying exactly how much it is here. If you got a contingency of 10% in there, then the project is not exactly at the $25 million that you were saying. But I have a concern here with regards to the fact that no matter, he talk about the enterprise, if you switch it over into the enterprise, then all money that come in on that system has to be used for the enterprise. I have a concern that the fact that the town is going to be on the hook for this sewer system. And you can only put so much in levy that's inside the levy, or you go outside the levy. Right now you had 12 million plus on the outside of the levy. You 11 point something inside the levy right now. The town has a $29 million debt right now, with $5 million of it being the water department. The people in this town needs to understand and know, going with this sewer system, taxes is going to rise. You talk about the betterment. How many of the businesses in this town have gave the town a commitment on this betterment that they're going to be in there, and where do you sit with the amount of money as to the size plant that you're going to build? There's a whole lot of discussion that needs to be done about this treatment system here. And when it comes to funding it, most important area of all of it, how does it get paid? And you certainly can't do it within the levy. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just address a couple of things. One is the commitment from businesses. So Mr. Sanders, in public in general, the structure that we've put forward and the structure that is in the home rule petition is that businesses will have to connect. Residences will have a choice. Residences can choose to connect or not. And so we're not looking for we had strong commitments from businesses, 97% or something like that. But given that most of the initial funding source comes from businesses and connection fees, we feel pretty confident in the front-end number, especially because we have the regulatory authority to compel businesses within the sewer district to participate.
Steve?
I understand what Selectman Gerber just said, but I also understand that there may, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the people that opt in may have the option to spread their payments out over 20 years.
That's right,
So,
with interest.
so who fronts all that money?
Exactly.
My understanding is that that money would ultimately be bonded, and what we receive from them would be half or a percentage point above what we're borrowing at. And so as we're receiving payments from them, we're then paying the bond back that we took out to essentially help them fund their operation and collecting a small user fee on top of that due to the delta in the interest rates. It's not a big number. Nobody's trying to take advantage of anybody, but essentially cover our risk.
Mr. Pro, did you have a question?
Yeah, it was just Mike Crew, White Pine Drive. I was just curious, why haven't we heard anything about this project since last town meeting, unless I missed an information session or something? It's a now $25 million project, $30 million project. We were asked to allocate $2.2 million last town meeting. My understanding was that that would bring us to construction, a construction ask at this coming town meeting. But now we're being asked for more design money, which is fine, but where's the update for the residents? I pay attention. I have no idea what's going on with this project.
I wish I had a better answer. I wish Mr. Galady was here, though.
Okay, part of the answer to that, and I think we're digressing on a sewer discussion, but I'll answer that part, at least in part, is associated with the siting of the sewer. So you'll see that Article 11 is associated with acquisition of property associated with the smart sewer. And so if you recall, town meeting, spring town meeting, there was some pushback on the sewer location, and so there's been a lot of work going into figuring out that location, and that's put the brakes on the actual construction aspect. The other piece to note here is that what we're looking at is not additional design funding, but actually construction funding associated with, not the comprehensive system necessarily, but construction funding associated with essentially the components of the system that are independent of the system operation. That is, the piping in the ground, right? We've got to get the piping to the groundwater discharge location in any case. So, that's where it's at. Just trying to get the location.
So,
Well, just to add to that, I think another delay has been that your board and my board have been working closely on that MOU, which has taken about 3 to 4 months to complete. So there wasn't much update on that, other than the two boards working together to transfer the authority from the Board of Selectmen to the Board of Water Commissioners, which took time.
right.
Erica?
Erica by 26 Fox Lane. Just a question about the funding. Do we need to, will the town be paying out the whole 25 million before we start gaining revenue? Or is this, like, do we have to, do we have to take a loan or whatever out for the whole amount? Or are people going to be starting to pay back that money as we're paying it off?
At a high level, it's the second part.
Okay.
The system, the operation, the construction is all intended to be phased. But within those phases, you can't collect money, you can't collect user fees until people can use it. So the town takes out the money, borrows the money, to ultimately fund the system, then pays that back over time with user fees that pay for both the operation and the capital construction. And then in the scenario that we've laid out, essentially, by the time we get to the second phase, some of those user fees from the first phase will actually start to offset the second phase. But the second phase will essentially look the same, where the town has got to, again, borrow a certain chunk to extend the system out, and then collect the user fees through the enterprise fund. Both the borrowing and the payments would be through the enterprise fund. Pay those back to the town over time. A good chunk of the capital costs are front-loaded in the sense that there are connection fees, and the connection fees cover a good chunk of the capital. As we've mentioned, users have an option to draw those connection fees out over time if they're too much up front, paying interest on that, and so each individual entity will have a different circumstance. But if everyone were to pay the connection fees right up front, we would be able to pay the capital off pretty quickly. As it is, we expect that we'll be paying the capital off for a while as connection and user fees come in.
So what's the ballpark ask here at town meeting? What are we asking for? How much?
I don't think we.
Well, that goes back to what I said, that I think the range of numbers is going to be anywhere from 2.5 to 25.
Inside the levy.
And the 2.5 would be, that's my rough number. It would be the amount that we needed to.
It's a pretty big range.
I understand. Like I said, I'm trying to give you guys as best the information I've got to yell at Mr. Glavy. But the basis of the 25 would be the minimum amount needed to go forward to utilize the MassWorks grant, right? So we want to be able to spend that.
And we don't have that figure, the minimum amount.
I don't have that figure. That doesn't mean we collectively don't, but I don't have that figure.
Well, the MassWorks grant's $1.5 million.
Right.
So I would, it'd be wise to at least appropriate $1.5 million. Because that money will come back to the grant.
Okay.
I didn't, and the reason I picked 2.5 is because I didn't know. I honestly don't know off the top of my head if the MassWorks grant is matching, or we just get the money as we spend it, or what, so.
Okay.
So I guess this is, I didn't want to get into a sewer conversation debate either. I mean, I recognize the importance of having it in the center economically, health, everything. But this particular article, if we just stick to how it reads, you're going to be having this same discussion. That's why I don't know if we're going to belabor this here, but the same discussion is going to happen on the floor with everybody's going to be asking the same thing. So this is looking more like a Tuesday nighter with
Right.
with this project.
The catch being, the important part being that come town meeting, it'll be a defined number.
Yeah, yep,
And rather than me trying tap dance and give people conceptual answers,
yep.
literal order of magnitude, $2.5 to $25 million numbers, I'll be able to say it's 1.8 million.
Okay. Yeah, so this won't be voted on by us this evening, then, is that safe to say? I mean, I'm not comfortable. I don't think anyone on this board is comfortable voting.
I mean, you know me, I'm a proponent of the sewer. My personal preference here would be to go forward with what we need to utilize the MassWorks money. But I don't think we're prepared, I'm not prepared to make a recommendation whether it should be 2.5 or 25 either.
Okay.
The one qualifier there is that I do think that the editorial comments associated with Article 10 should note that the total project cost is anticipated to be on the order of $25 million.
Excuse me, and I think as part of the presentation, or whether it's before town meeting or town meeting, is the betterment. All of the scenarios done to date have shown that the town will pay its betterment in full upfront. And that basically gives the project working capital to move forward. So we really do need to understand what that number is, because that's a number that the town has to come up with, the taxpayers have to come up with inside the levy over the next couple of years. So we're getting into budget cycle here. If we start spending money, and say, the last numbers I saw, the betterment for the town was in the 1.6 range, I think it was, correct, in that range.
Sure.
So if it's 1.6 million, we are gonna have to come up with $1.6 million up front to start this process going forward. So recognize that over the next couple of years, we're committing to have to come up with that much money to move this project forward. So from a budgetary standpoint, and it has to be within 2.5. Okay, you can't borrow for betterments. Are you? So just recognize that that's gonna be tough, but in at least one budget, if not more than one budget over the next couple of years. So just keep that in the back of your head as we're going forward here, because it's a lot of money to get this thing going.
So I suggest we just end it here and without any kind of vote, move on.
Right.
You've got to vote to get put the warrant.
I mean, I think,
You got to vote on the warrant.
yeah, we need to be prepared to continue to get the answers to this, so that prior to town meeting, we can give the voters a recommendation.
It's tough to vote an article without a number. It's tough to place an article on the warrant without having a number. I'd feel more comfortable if we said there was a number not to exceed your 2.5. I'm not gonna say not to exceed 25 million, but if 2.5 was the number that we realistically felt that would be the high end, or that would be reasonable. I mean, if we already allocated $2.2 million for engineering and design.
I would not become, I literally just picked a number off the top of my head. And I'm not immersed enough in the financial aspects of it to be able to rely upon that number.
So you've placed this article on the warrant based on the first motion that we took tonight. The question is there any modification? And certainly you can change that, I'm not saying you can't. Oh, sorry, you did decide, that's right, well, no, because there was,
That was the caveat that I put in there, was that if they're placed.
oh, perhaps I didn't hear you correctly, because I suggested we insert the words "and place each article."
I thought we did place the articles.
That's not my understanding.
No, I thought we were just
The
voting on
intent
the
of my
order.
amendment was the order, if in fact they were placed.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So then we should vote to place each article, and we've by now only placed Article 12, correct? Is that everyone's understanding? Because we can revise, whether we did it or
Placed,
not, we
correct.
can revise.
Right, correct.
We can revise our prior vote, so, okay.
That's why at the end of that, I
Okay,
asked for
thank you.
clarification.
Thank you, I missed that. Okay, so would we like to place Article 9? Well, it would be easier to go through the ones that are simple and place all of those at once, and the ones that require detail correction or changes, to do those separately.
There's only 17 articles, we're already, I think we can.
So we could probably leave 9 on its own for now and lump that in with other things, hearing agreement on Article 9.
Okay.
And focus on Article 10 for the moment. Is there any changes that we would like to make to this article at this time? I did hear a change in the description that would include something along the lines of the total project cost is anticipated to be approximately 25 million to be added to the description, and also the description that was modified on the screen. But is there any modification to the article itself, or further modification to the description?
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask a question, is it reasonable for us to expect to be able to do whatever we need to do in order to get the MassWorks grant for $1.5 billion, based upon it being October 1st? Based upon us having a town meeting where we're voting on funding potentially, is it reasonable to expect that we'll be able to do everything we need to do within the guidelines of the Commonwealth, Mass General laws? Are we going to be able to execute some sort of construction in order to trigger this grant to be able to get the $1.5 million?
So I don't know where we are, just to start off this conversation, I don't know where we are in design. Depending upon where we are in design, if the design documents were ready on October 28th and could be put out to bid, then you'd need at least roughly 3 weeks between that period of time to advertise and actually open bids, and then you'd need perhaps a couple more weeks to finalize and award the contract. I don't know if that leaves enough time. You could be in the winter at that point. It could be snow on the ground.
So the conditions of the grant are, what, just a shovel in the ground? Or is it significant progress?
By when?
December 31st?
In order for us to qualify for the $1.5 million grant.
I don't know where that date came from. I don't know. I haven't seen that date. From our conversation with the MassWorks folks a couple weeks ago, it's their expectations that we expend $650,000 by the end of this fiscal year, June 30th.
Has that been triggered already or not? Did we spend $650 yet or no?
No. And that.
But that can be on
it can
design
be
services, that can be.
both. So it'd be 150 on design and 500,000 on construction, with the balance of that to be spent by the end of the next fiscal year, FY '21.
Okay.
So to answer your question, it's possible.
It's possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you would end up doing is finding a piece of the project that has value to the project to do ahead of time that won't change. Whether it's the groundwater discharge site, whether it's, horizontal pipe connecting workers' credit union, which we know there's already, provisions there to connect them to the sewer. So I think there's valid projects that could be done. But we haven't, seen the design 100% either, so, because we just got the project.
What was that date, Nick? You said June?
Yeah, the end of FY '20, so June 30th, 2020. Milestone one was to have $650,000 expended.
Okay.
Mark Rambacher, 205 Cornwall. I have a quick question on the grant. If we spend this $1.5 million from MassWorks, are we committing to spending the $25 million, or are they completely orthogonal? Is there any requirement that if we spend the 1.5 from MassWorks, we're gonna have to do something later?
It's just like the 2.2 that the town has already authorized. The town could put the project down, burn our bridges with the state.
So if we spent the 1.5,
some pretty
we don't have to pay it back if the project goes forward, or we do?
It's my understanding that we don't, but don't quote me on that. That's a good question for council.
Yeah, I mean, they want to see a successful project. They don't want to spend that $1.5 million and get that
Yes,
done.
but if we don't ever allocate the 25, do we end up owing them the 1.5? That's the question.
I haven't heard discussion of that type of penalty in it, but we'll follow up and get an idea and understanding and answer on that.
That is fair.
Yeah, okay.
So in the event that we vote to put Article 10, for instance, into the warrant, we can, if we feel as though we just don't have enough information to move forward, we can basically withdraw without prejudice, right? At some point, we can.
You'd have to
withdraw
make a
without-
motion at town meeting to pass over the article, and then it would have to be seconded, and by majority would have to be voted. Again, defer to town council, but.
I mean, if no one moves an article, yeah. I'm not,
I don't know.
You
I
wouldn't
haven't
have to
seen
move
that
the
scenario.
article at all. I mean,
Right, I think if no motion is made on an article, then the moderator passes
Yeah,
over.
we could just withdraw it and,
I mean, if it's on the warrant, someone could make a motion, but you can opt not to, the board of selectmen can opt to not make a motion.
This is your article, though.
Yeah, so whoever brings the article is the person that could withdraw the article, correct?
Any voter can really make a motion to do anything at
Right.
town meeting.
But as far as withdrawing it.
Just get the votes,
But,
second.
I mean, just
votes.
to be clear, it's, once it's on the warrant, it can't withdraw.
Right.
And it's there on the warrant for someone to make a motion.
I guess my point is that if we vote to put it on and in the meantime don't have the information we want, the finance committee's not comfortable, we just withdraw it and, but I'd at least want to have it there in case Mr. Glavy or somebody else comes in and here's the facts, this is what we need right now, and here we go.
Yeah.
You're putting the article, you're voting to put the article in, you're not voting to support the article.
Right.
That's my
You're not
point.
taking a position on the
Right.
support.
Right.
And I would tend to think that the voters would look at this. If we said, hey, you know what, guys, we're gonna come back in May, we're gonna have it all buttoned up in May, so, you know, on May 6th or whatever that subsequent Tuesday is, we can break ground. Nobody's gonna fight us on that, right? No one's gonna move the article and then argue that we should pass it.
All right.
So are we looking at as printed
It's printed,
and then modify the description as discussed?
yeah.
Yes, please.
So is there a motion to place Article 10 and/or Article 11
Both.
as printed?
I've moved to place Articles 10 and 11 on the warrant as printed.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? All right.
I'll say aye. Okay.
Want me to stay in the library?
Oh, man. All right.
Thanks, Nick.
Oh, library, probably the next large item to sort through.
So, none of the previous articles that we already discussed and said we're good with moving on, those are not placed yet, 1 through 7?
Technically not, according to the clarification of the majority of the board, at least.
You guys mind if I do those slate?
Sure.
1 through
Seven?
7?
Was it 1 through 8?
Yes, 1 through 8, 1 through 9, because we didn't include
Move on
9.
to the library. I just want to make sure that there was no opposition, there was no reason we weren't putting those on, right?
Right.
No, I thought the idea was to deal with the big things first.
It's fine. But we won't do those as a slate.
Okay, so 1 through 9.
Oh, no, just move on to the library now. But
Oh,
if you
okay.
have it up there, it's fine. Otherwise,
All right, gotcha.
it's just something we can get out of the way.
All right.
Don't want to miss it.
So, for Article 13, at this point, we have 3 different scenarios crafted, both with the article and with the explanation. If you look at option 1, it's not subject to debt exclusion. If you look at option 2, the language that is there that is not in option 1 is at the bottom of the article, 4 lines up, starts with the words costs by a like amount. That sentence that follows, while not a legal condition to the borrowing of funds authorized by this vote, it is the expectation of this town meeting that a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion question, so-called, relating to this project will be placed before the voters of the town at an election. Those are the key words that separate option 2 from option 1. And if you flip to the next page, same thing, 4 lines up on option 3. Line starts with costs by a like amount. The next sentence separates this article from the other 2 as well. No amount shall be borrowed or expended pursuant to this vote unless the town shall have voted to exclude the amounts necessary to repay any borrowing undertaken pursuant to this vote from the property tax limitation contained in Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 21C, also known as Proposition 2.5. And the explanations are written accordingly. So the question becomes, what version of Article 13 should be placed on the warrant?
Board?
So we've heard tonight that Steve, you said the 24th is when we can expect the number that,
That's what we're shooting for,
midnight of the 24th?
if we're lucky.
Will you be disseminating the architect's number before that, or are you gonna hold both of those until we have them?
No, as soon as we get the architect's number, once we've checked it, we'll make that public.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Option 2, I think, is a little bit of a slippery slope for Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. Option 2 basically ensures, if I understand it correctly, it ensures that it's going to be done inside the levy, regardless of what that vote comes out in the spring. It's going to be done. If it passes on our option 2, and a debt exclusion vote doesn't pass in the spring, we're doing it inside the levy.
That would be correct based on the path that you just mentioned.
So
But that's
it's
That's a
on
violation.
not
us.
the only outcome.
Yeah, it's on us as the boards to make sure that the people come out and vote. It's not gonna be on the folks that are supporting the library. There's half of those people that were here on one of the meetings, they don't want it, an override. So, most likely, those people aren't gonna vote for it anyway. So, I'm thinking, why do we even need option 2? It doesn't really do much for us, because it pretty much guarantees option 1 is gonna go through anyway. So why not look at either option 1 or option 3?
Well said.
Right.
I don't disagree.
We had this discussion at our last meeting, and, Greg brought that same opinion up. I think as a board, we recognize the importance of the larger capital projects that go outside the levy according to our financial policy. I think what we were, some of us were looking at was the warrant that was presented to us at that time was number 2. That was the only one. And it was a compromise, something that, to get this passed, we have a grant, a deadline, to make sure that that it gets passed, and that we pitch the importance of the flexibility and everything later on of how we can finance this and why it should go outside, and the flexibilities it gives us as a board and our finance team. So I think that was kind of where the discussion rested. Yes, there is a risk of it being put in the levy. What is that risk? Well, it's in the levy. And we know, now there is an elephant behind us now in the town sewer. But that was there anyway.
But why is that bad?
What's that?
By having the vote later on? I guess my fear is that,
Yeah, sure, I'm not saying it was. No, I was actually, I was kind of going down that road, for sure.
I should have interrupted, I'm sorry.
No, so I just wanted to, I just think that was an option that I think a few of us could live with. It looked like something that made sense. We're not bursting the levy with the library initially, so I had a comfort level, me personally, looking at the numbers, and then understanding that that our financial policy really wants these type of projects outside the levy at the end of the day. This was a unique circumstance that I could live with, and I think there was a few of us that could live with that as well, making the decision in the spring, get it in front of the voters and letting them decide. But, Greg and Alan brought up, a good point as well.
I think the point that I was trying to drive at was that if we did it this way, it would secure the ability that they can go get the grant for the library, and the library's going forth. And how we, in the spring, find out how we're gonna fund it. My fear is that it goes to town meeting one way or the other. People will be voting not for the library, but maybe because it's outside the levy or inside the levy, instead of just voting for what the need of the library is. And that's why I guess I was looking at B.
And I would add to that, that what B gives the voter is that the agency to decide what's worth the opportunity cost, right? That's really the question, right? If it's in the levy, then it comes at the expense of something else, full stop, right? Especially in the couple of years, I think it's 2024 and 2025, where things are tight. In those 1 or 2 years, it could come at the expense of something else. So, and it allows the voter to look at that and say, is that acceptable to me that in 2024 or 2025, we may have to forego a police car that particular year and shuffle things out? Or alternatively, would I prefer that the town have the flexibility to go do those things? So I see it as an ideal option, and I mean, I've been clear here, I would rather see it done within the levy. I think it can and should be done within the levy, but also respect the fact that voters can differentiate those things. To your point, Greg, that it won't be a particular project advocate that is for or against this, I think is a pro, not a con, because it establishes people are voting having looked at what the opportunity cost is. They're no longer voting based on, well, I want a library at any cost, or I want this thing at any cost, or I want that thing at any cost. It allows them to look at it in the cold, hard facts of it and understand, there's a couple of years where this could be a little tighter and this is what it's gonna cost. And if they wanna do it outside the levy, then there's that number too. But then it's not clouded by, to Joe's point, the competing interests and the things that don't give us a good read of what the town wants. So I guess that's why I'd rather see B. I think it's the better of the options rather than a slippery slope.
I just think it shifts the burden back to us as a town to get it passed in the spring. The library folks are gonna get their library. If you go through option 2 and it passes, they're gonna get their library no matter what. They don't need to support this article. In the spring, they don't need to take the vote to vote for an override. We're asking it to be an optional override vote. It's almost like saying, well, let's just take a litmus test and see what the town really wants. And if they don't want it, well, we're stuck with it inside the levy, and we're just gonna have to deal with it as a town. Is that the right thing to do for the town, is the question?
Well, I think the question is the opposite of that. The question is, what does the town want to do? So the way you phrased that was that, essentially, we're risking the town doing something that's different than what we want, when in fact it's the opposite. It's us being led by the town, and it's not our, in that scenario, I don't see it's our job to advocate for one position or the other, but rather our job to educate the town as to what those opportunity costs are. Here's what this means in 2024 and 2025, and I have a high degree of confidence that particularly in the absence of the either or, the specific project, the town folks that show up to vote will be able to differentiate that. And yes, that puts an onus on us to give them solid information. Believe me, I know what it feels like to not show up with solid information. But,
So let me put it another way. If this goes through as option 2, it passes on town meeting floor, all is fine and dandy. In the spring, everybody who shows up to vote at our town vote is gonna have the choice of voting for, hey, I want a tax increase, or I don't. And oh, by the way, this tax increase just helps us as a town to become more flexible with our spending. I don't think you're gonna get a lot of people that are gonna raise their hand and say, I want my taxes to go up. I just don't think you're gonna get that, Chase.
Then you would vote against it in October then, if that was the case regardless.
Oh, not necessarily,
But the
not
point is,
necessarily.
why not do option 3, which is the override right up front? And it's still that, you're having that town vote then and now. And you're determining, and you had mentioned that it's not our job to educate, it's our job to make sure that we're doing the best thing financially and following our financial policies. That's, the slippery slope comment is one that I can sink my teeth into, because I agree with you. I think it's not putting us in the best position financially by putting it inside the levy. The whole thing's inside the levy. And if in fact an override did pass in the spring, then we end up getting the same result that we would have if we put forward option 3 and it passed with option 3. But I think it's kind of, the right thing to do is to go for the override now and put that forward. That's the option that I would potentially support.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
So reading memos, I did some research, memos from our finance team as far back as 2014. They have repeatedly said projects of this size should be funded outside of the levy.
As an exclusion.
As a debt exclusion, thank you. I originally liked the language in option 2, but I can't tell you how many people came up to me and said, yeah, we'll go with option 2, but you know what? When it comes to a 2.5 debt exclusion override in the spring, I'm not voting for it. So I was like, okay, thank you for your honesty. And so the information from our finance team, the feedback that I have received from the community, compounded with the discussion that we had here tonight regarding the projects that we don't have the numbers on, the sewer, the land purchase for the sewer, and this project, which we already know the sewer project cannot be a debt exclusion. It has to be funded inside the levy. So now we're going to vote to put 14.5, which we still don't have a number, it's a moving number at this point, inside the levy. So how big is the levy? I mean, we don't know, we're working with too many moving numbers. You know, I agree with Chuck, we have these financial policies in place, our finance team is telling us what to do. I don't know why we just keep ignoring it. And I think this is a perfect example of why we have those policies in place. And that a project of this size should be funded as a exclusion. And I think the other articles that we discussed tonight just exacerbate the situation, and give more reason to take that seriously into consideration.
If I can respond, and then I'll shut my trap, because my position is pretty clearly laid out here. Two things. One, we're conflating the best financial position with the most flexible financial position. So undoubtedly, going outside of the levy gives us the maximum amount of flexibility, but flexibility doesn't mean it's the best financial position, right? What that does is gives us the option to do lots of other things inside the levy if we want to, but that doesn't mean that those are the best things. So let's not conflate what the best option is with what the most flexible option is. The second point is that, to Cindy's point, that we've had multiple projects where the finance team has said, hey, we should do this outside of the levy. That's exactly what we're looking at now, and this goes to the fundamental point that the financial projections that we've been given every single time have been incredibly conservative. And to that point, we've sustained these projects that the financial team has said should be outside of the levy, and I completely understand why they say that, right? Because what they're looking at is the maximum amount of flexibility, right? And I really respect and appreciate that position. But what that shows is that the incredibly conservative nature of those analyses means that when we hear from them, 2024 and 2025 could be kind of tight. If we do the whole thing in the levy, they could be kind of tight. That gives me a remarkable amount of confidence that we can work within that number if we did do it all within the levy. And I respect the fact that maybe the townsfolk do want to do it outside of the levy. Fine, let's give folks the option to do that, hence option B. And would fully support going forward with a ballot vote to do so. But what we're talking about is giving the folks the option, the town residents the option in option B to determine how they want their money expended. And that, I think, is the best possible scenario, to give them a choice. and to show them, listen, 2024 and 2025 could be kind of tight. There might be an opportunity cost in those 2 years, and here's what it looks like.
So where are you getting the 2024 and 2025? Because I didn't get
Steve's
that
analysis
from
was the
Steve's.
tables that Steve put up with the
Yeah.
debt services coming off.
I thought there was gonna be more of an immediate impact than that.
No, it's
I know what you're saying.
It's actually not the immediate years, but the out years, a couple of years, where it's a little bit challenging.
So just to continue the conversation somewhat, there are some things that the sewer certainly is in front of us as far as keeping some debt, that debt service, should we move forward with the sewer, will be inside the levy for reasons that I stated earlier. We've still got the space needs. We've got a lot of identified needs that we need to take care of. We've got a senior center that we've committed to. We've put money aside that we have committed to doing that. We have the LPD exterior, which we don't know what that number is going to be. That's something we're going to have to address. The LHS roof is coming up. Shaker Lane is coming up. Park and Rec we've mothballed a project for the Park and Rec Commission. I do not want to hamstring us as a community to do anything else by taking away the flexibility and putting this project inside the levy. I see the vote on town meeting floor as something that's outside the levy. Why kick that down the road and do it in May? I just see it doing it now as being a better barometer of finding out, is this how people want to spend their money? And as far as if we do put it outside the levy, our financial team has demonstrated a strength in paying down our debt and retiring our debt early and being creative, using capital stabilization, using funding sources within the levy to pay down some of the debt that's outside the levy. So I'd rather put it outside and be aggressive at paying it down and trust the professionals that we have in place and than put ourselves in. You got me to stop.
Any other comments by the finance of this board? So we got to open it up. Mr. Sanders?
George Sanders, 672 Great Road. I believe that our finance committee has carried this town in a way that, as a taxpayer, I've been very pleased with their recommendations on projects over the years. I've been here 19 years. And I think you can't go wrong by taking a project where you have the flexibility to put it outside of the levy. One of the things that the trustees of the library said, they didn't say that the library would be free. They said that it would cost you 52 cents a day. It was one of the statements that they made about the cost on the library. I believe that the library should be outside the levy, and I'll tell you why. Flexibility is something that speaks in terms of value. As Chuck just mentioned there are many other projects that you don't know what's in the soon to come that this town is going to need. And if you take and put that 14.5 inside the levy, I think it cripples the town's ability to move around, I said, for at least 4 to 5 years. Because that money could be on the outside, and you could have how much of that 14 within the levy that you have that flexibility to take care of some situation like the police station. You know, we shouldn't be working on that police station down there to fix it, as new as it is. But because they did certain things, the contractors did certain things, during conditions that it wasn't the best, then after a period of time, we end up with having to go in and do some work here. I am for the library. I support the library in terms that the people in this town deserve the library. There's no question in my mind about it. They deserve it. They deserve it because why? The state is giving us 5.8 of our taxpayer money back to pay it. There ain't too many projects that a town or city gets that the state turn around and give you a nice sum of money. And of course, if you do some green in there, there's a little bit more money to come to that. The schools and the library are the only two elements in a city or town that the government is going to come back and give you some money. Now, the only thing that I have a question about is on the 5.8, was that based on the 14.5, or was that 5.8 based on the 12-something that they went into the state with at that time? And if the project increases, is there a chance that the state will give us more money?
No.
On the grant? So the grant was what we went in for and told them that it cost. Okay, I can live with that. But I think for the selectmen, you say it's not your position. You're the head of this government. I think it is your position to guide the people in this town as to what is best for this town, along with the input that comes in from the finance. I was at the finance meeting. They sort of kind of went along, the outside would be more advantageous to the town. And if the town happened to do well, I mean, if you got it outside, you want to throw a little bit back on to the inside of the levy, you can do that too. You have that flexibility to do that. But I say, you the selectmen, you need to make a decision which way this article go. Thank you.
Mr. Houston?
Rob Houston, 55 Jennifer Street. I agree with Mr. Sanders on one point, a lot of points actually, but one point in particular, and that is town needs a library. We've worked really hard for it. We have $6 million, $5.86 million committed from the state that we're potentially pissing away. I think it's important that we go to the taxpayer in the spring, in May, and give them all those options. In other words, if what we want under the levy is flexibility, fine. I'm one of the library supporters who will work hard to pass that outside the levy ballot initiative. And who you're hearing from that says, I won't vote for a $150 a year tax increase, it's not me. I'll work for it. And I think it's incumbent upon the leadership in this town to present to the people, we have competing community needs. We have police stations, we have libraries, we have schools, we have things that we need, town space and ballot needs. And we present it to the town that says we need money outside the levy. We should not be competing projects against each other inside or outside the levy. It sends all the wrong messages to our citizenry. All the wrong messages. We should be presenting a package to them in the spring that says, if we pass this outside the levy vote, this is where the flexibility that we have now to spend on the needs of our town. That's what we should be looking to do, which is why option 2, going back to Chase's point, is exactly what we need. And it's kind of what Mr. Sanders said. He's in favor of the library outside the levy. Sounds to me like he'll be beating the path with me in May. Right? To get that passed. Right? Right. Yes! The point is not to vote 3, the point is to vote 2 and take it to the people. That's what we should do. And I'm willing to do it. And I think the library people are too. So if you're hearing from the library people that they're not willing to do that, I don't know who it is. And I will vote for it. In May.
Mr. Houston, you summed up what I was trying to say at the very, very beginning, but you did it much, much better job than I did. So I should have had you, had you stand up right away.
Actually, Mr. Sanders gave me the great intro.
Just a point on option 3 and option 2. Option 3 is a debt exclusion vote. If people at town meeting vote for option 3 as debt exclusion vote, it still has to go on a ballot, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes.
You still have to go out and vote. Then the people, everybody has an opportunity then to vote yea or nay.
For the library.
Any debt exclusion.
Well, we're presupposing that everybody wants the library by putting language like this up there. Language just says, we're not voting to build a library, we've already decided to do that. We're just voting on how we're going to pay for it.
Excellent.
And that was my point at the last meeting we were at. But I won't belabor that one because nobody wants to agree with me on that.
I agree with you.
It should be a debt exclusion vote, and then everybody gets to vote whether it's going to be that, or there's either you're gonna pay for a library or you're not gonna have a library. I have gotten 550, that's an exaggeration, letters from people in town in support of the library. And every single one of them says, oh, and don't forget, make it outside or inside the levy. You're the only person who said to me, Mr. Houston, that, hey, I'm willing to pay the taxes for it. All the other letters that I've gotten and I've seen have all made sure it's inside the levy. No, let's don't do that. That's one point. My next point is just me, Alan McRae, 14 Coughlin Road. I have some support on the Finance Committee, but I don't know how they're going to come down. But I'm telling you right now, it violates our financial guidelines, and people say, well, you know, those are just the guidelines. But we get guidelines because of past experience. And past experience tells us when you put large capital projects under the levy, you put at risk everything going forward. We've done that in the past, and the school, I keep harping on that, but that was the big one that went under the levy and should never have done it. What happened? We had no money for capital purchases for years. Every single year, we taxed the taxpayers with a capital exclusion to buy a dump truck. There was no money for buildings. There was no money to repair building systems. Boilers blew up in what was old high school, and we had scrounged to find the money to repair it. Teachers were laid off. You may not remember that, but the school department remembers that. They remember coming every year and asking for money and finding out they only got so much because we only had so much, which resulted in teachers being laid off. The police department never laid a guy off, but they went down 3 or 4 officers over about a 5-year period because people resigned or retired and there was no money to fill the slot. City Hall employees almost went union because they didn't get a raise, and some of you, Joe specifically remembers, they didn't get a raise for 7 or 8 years, although all union employees got raises because we had contracts. And those employees included the library employees. Let's don't do this. Let's have a new library. I agree with George. I'll vote for it. I agree with Ron. I'm willing to pay the tax. But let's not put this thing under the levy. And you had ample demonstrations tonight about putting stuff under the levy. You got 6 million here. You got 2.5 to 25 in the sewer. You've got this one under the levy. We went under the levy to build a fire station, which we shouldn't have done. It violated our guidelines, but we did it. But you know we're still paying for it. I mean, it didn't go away after we voted and it didn't pay for it in 1 year.
It's still there, it has to be paid for every year. George brought up another thing that you don't think about, but we're going to pay probably $500,000 to fix the police station. That's gonna be under the levy. How much is left under the levy, Steve? Did anybody ask the finance director to provide them with, if we put this and this and this and this under the levy,
What's left?
is it there? I bet you it's not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christine Brown, 57 Gristmill. So I'm new to the sewer discussion, but I just hear these crazy wild numbers. And I've lived here for 5 years. They haven't started anything, they haven't done anything. Why should we hold all this money for what they might possibly need? Like, if I had to choose between the sewer and the library, I'd choose the library.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the dangers that we're pitting, and this is what we didn't want to do. We didn't want to pit the projects against each other, in discussion with, Alan and Greg. That's something you kind of take away from in voting in October, is you're no longer pitting, knowing that the sewer is coming in the levy regardless, that you're not pitting the library against that project, because people are going to say, we know that I want the sewer, I want the town sewer, but I also want the library, but there's no way we can do them both in the levy. So I don't know. This is one of those, we've talked for 2 hours at our meeting. I know you guys talked for a couple hours at your last meeting.
And the meeting before that.
In the meeting before that. That I will say, as a finance team, we probably would tend to recommend, and I'm not going to sit here and speak for everybody, but I know we recommended that we would like to see this outside of the levy. It was how we got there that was the discussion. And that's where we didn't have a discussion on want a library, need a library, things like that, because that's not our charter. It's what's the best way to finance the library. Let everybody vote in November or October. So this strictly is about how we're getting to it outside of the levy, and what we would have to do as a team to really explain that over the next several months. And there were some of us that could kind of relied on our ability, hopefully, to do that with the town, especially when we would come into next spring knowing what all of this looked like, what the sewer looked like. But hey, a week ago, I didn't know I had the potential 25 million being put underneath the levy at the same meeting, potentially, that the library was being voted for. So it's a lot to digest in a half an hour.
I just wanted to say that it does appear as though you can do a debt exclusion for sewer work, so.
I didn't hear what you
It
said.
does appear as though you can do a debt exclusion for sewer work, so it is something.
For the
that
betterments?
For the actual entire project, but on the IGR.
Not the betterments.
Yeah.
I don't believe the betterments
No,
are.
not the betterments, but the actual sewer project can be a debt exclusion.
Right.
Right behind you.
Hi, Trina Hagberg, Hartwell Ave. So full disclosure, I've been on the fundraising committee for the library for the last 2 years, and I found the most enlightening thing about our town's finances and where we stand in inside and outside since, the last few months when I've really dug in and found us. And the presentations have been fabulous, and it's really given me a better understanding of where we are in a town. And today I went back to the master plan document we prepared a few years ago, and we've come out, and all of these projects are listed on it, and they're currently being pitted against each other. And what I fear is that if we put the library, which is a high priority project, currently on our master plan, which we've reduced the cost with grants and fundraising, and we put it outside the levy in October at this town meeting, we don't have enough time to communicate to the town why that is important for everything else that we've said is important in that master plan document. I can see voting for the project in October, and I can see myself voting for an exclusion for the library in the spring, but I want to see the full numbers, the final numbers, not the like estimated and we're throwing a number out right now because we have to vote for it. I want to see what you guys can come up with and say, we can do this for our town, we can do the senior center, we can do the sewer, we can do the library. We need the flexibility. It would be prudent of us to vote in the spring to go outside on a ballot in May. The other thing I can understand you're hearing people saying, no, I won't do it if it's outside, and I feel that uncertainty too, and that's why I'm saying we do that way, so give us time to say it. Melrose, where my in-laws live, just voted their own Proc 2.5 in for this very reason, to increase their taxes so that they can do these things, but they spent at least 6 months educating their public about why it was important and how it would, if it did not pass, how it would impact every department, schools, fire, police, everything. And I really would love to see that kind of path forward and education of our town, involving the departments and helping to sell it that way, instead of saying we need to sell it in the next 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Judy Grady, 5 Oak Ridge Road. Excuse me. I think this is all coming out to, we don't trust the voters' judgment. Excuse me. If we have if we take option B, it gives the voters a chance to learn about things. I mean, we've heard numbers going from what, 2.5 million to 25 million tonight? And we know almost pretty closely what the library is gonna cost. We know we've raised roughly $7 million toward or $6.5 million toward the library already between the state grant and the fundraising. We hope we'll have more of that by October 28th. But let's give the voters the option to do what they see once they know all the numbers. We don't know all the numbers. I hadn't heard these sewer numbers before tonight. And I'm sure a lot of people in town haven't heard a $25 million sewer project. And we don't know when it's gonna happen. So why not give the voters the opportunity to make that choice once they have all the information about the upcoming projects, rather than saying, okay, well, let's just say, okay, the library's gonna be outside the levy or inside the levy. Let's give people a chance to make an educated response to this, rather than just assuming, number one, that everything that happens is going to be bad, because that seems to be, oh, all these projects are coming in and we're not gonna have any money. There's money coming into this town. We're developing money. We've got businesses coming in. Why take the negative point when we could say, hey, maybe at spring meeting, we'll find out we had more money than we ever thought we had. And we can do more of these projects. Oh, Joe, don't laugh at me.
No, I was. That wasn't it at all. You just said a good point.
I just think that by only looking at the negative stuff, we're kind of cutting off our nose to spite our face. I think we really need to give voters the chance to see what's coming up, what the costs are gonna be, and let the voters decide. I mean, we're not dumb. A lot of us have been in this town for a long time. Maybe not as long as you.
Does it seem like the
I've been here
sewer?
32 years. And I think that this town has done an amazing job. And I like to think that it trusts its residents to do the right thing when they have full knowledge. That's my story of sticking to it.
Mike?
Mike Brewer, Pine Drive. So, in my eyes, option 2 is, so Mr. McCray actually brought it up at a meeting last week, and I was listening, and as he said it, I was thinking the exact same thing. If you choose option 2, if you have people that are in favor of the library, but under no circumstance want it inside the levy, option 2, they have no choice. It would have to be a no vote if you don't want it to tie up capital for the town. Option 2, there's no mechanism, there's no vote for you. So in that respect, I think it's unfair to those voters. Also, as chairman of the Park and Rec Commission, I'm very, very worried if we fund this within the levy of what happens to our capital. we don't suck up a lot of capital for the town, but we rely on capital for sailboats, for docks, for, you know, a lot of things that, you know, $50,000 a year in repairs and maintenance for our stuff. You know, that's just our department. I'm sure other departments are gonna feel the crunch, and I think that's been touched on tonight as well. So, you know, in that respect, you know, as the chair, and I'm speaking for myself, as the chair of Park and Rec Commission, you know, option 3 is the way to go for the betterment of our department. And if I could just touch on this notion that we're pitting projects against each other, I think is not accurate. I think, you know, and I've seen it, you know, the board, your board and the finance committee and watching the meetings, you're hesitant to speak about other projects that are coming down the line. You're not pitting projects against each other, that's planning. Like, we should be planning out these projects as they come in, whether or not it's sewer, or the library, or this building here. We've hired an OPM, we have a space needs study that's ongoing. What's gonna happen with this building? We don't know. So we're gonna be asked to put almost $9 million, you know, once we get all the money back from the state, $9 million inside the levy. When we have other projects coming down the line, we have capital to finance within town. You know, it's gonna tie us up, and, you know, to ask the town, do you approve of this project, yes or no? And then 8 months later, how are we gonna fund it? You know, has that ever been done before? That sounds, I mean, in my eyes, that's your board skirting your responsibility. You're elected to make these decisions, to put that warrant up on the, up at town meeting the way you decide. You're the board, you know, we'll take it out on you at the voting booth if we disagree with you, but that's your responsibility.
Mark Rambacher, Hartwell Ave, also on the library trustees. I think actually option B is the one that gives you the choice. If you want the library and you want it outside, you vote in May outside, in October inside. If you don't want it, if you want it only inside, you vote May, October inside, and you don't vote outside. So I think it's the one that gives you the maximum flexibility so that you can say, I want the library and I will decide later how to pay for it. And I agree, it becomes your job and the finance committee's job to sell this. We don't have, at the point we're at now, we are pitting projects against each other because we didn't have this discussion 2 years ago when there was time to do this planning for the library to figure out how you're funding it. The point we're at now, there isn't time there really isn't enough time to educate people on what outside means. If you go to May, you have the opportunity as the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen to advocate for why it needs to be outside and how that gives you the flexibility. And Chuck, you mentioned a bunch of projects coming down the line that you want, like, that are potential, like the senior center and Shaker Lane and the space needs and things like that. And you mentioned those as by taking the library outside gives you the optional flexibility, but you didn't mention that those could also go outside to give you the same flexibility. So to say that by taking the library outside gives you the flexibility on those projects doesn't give you any more flexibility than taking those projects outside. So by saying them all like that, we are pitting them against each other, right? It needs to be a long-term plan that can't be decided in the next month. There's not enough time to educate people in the next month of what the long-term plan is because there isn't one. If we go to May, we have the chance to do the long-term plan. And as a citizen, I will advocate for option B, and I will say that it does give you the flexibility and use whatever platform I have to advocate for an exclusion. If you, as a Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee, can present the information that is the best thing to do, right? But the taxpayers don't have that information, and it's very hard to get them that information in the next month.
Can I add one?
Chuck wanted to go first. So I'll just say that I think it's a little patronizing to folks. I mean, Judy was talking about we're not stupid, and then you're saying that we need time to educate people on what outside and inside the levy means. I think that's patronizing to the voters, frankly. I think people are very well aware of what outside the levy means. If you want to get into, Mark, I'm not looking for your rebuttal right now. I'm commenting. There was comments made about, well, we don't know what those numbers are. We don't know what these numbers are. We've got a number of $14.5 million for something that I've stated over and over again. There's wants and there's needs. Yeah, there's $5.8 million that's been referred to as a coupon. I get coupons in the mail every week. I get something in my mailbox that asks me if I want a new garage, if I want a swimming pool, if I want an addition. And those are all coupons that I would love to exercise. Those are all things that I want and I would love to have in my house, but I can't take other needs that I have, my children's education or what have you. There's other needs that I need to take care of, and I don't know what's gonna come down the road. I don't know if my burner's gonna go, the roof's gonna go. I have no idea what those other needs might be. I've said before, and I'm gonna stick by it, I love the library. I think the librarians, I think the trustees, I think we do a great job. In every letter that we've received, Alan mentioned 550 letters, I got a few less than that. Every letter that I've received has started 3 paragraphs of how wonderful our library is, and it is. It's fantastic, and I consider it an asset to our town. I do think that it would be great to have a new library, but I don't see the need right now, even with the $5.8 million. I was willing to give up the $1.5 million for the MassWorks grant on the sewer project, and I'd be willing to give up $5.8 million so that we can do a comprehensive, let's do some planning, let's get our heads together, and let's not pit things against each other. Let's talk about doing a town hall campus with a library, and it might be a $25 million project, it might be a $40 million project. I don't know what that number is, but I'd rather get our heads around that and do some planning and do this the right way instead of doing a Hail Mary to put it on the hill, which is what that was, because the site plan, when you guys were going for the grant application, the slope site wasn't in the mix until the 11th hour. We kind of had a gun held to our head to put the grant application in. We had to make a decision, and basically, we got our packets on a Saturday. We had to make a decision on that Monday Board of Selectmen meeting. So we don't have the numbers to make these decisions. We don't know what this is going to cost. Right now, we've got a placeholder of $14.5 million. We don't know what it's going to cost. That number could come back at $25 million, it could come back at $12 million. We don't know what the number's gonna be. So, please, there's no number that says not to exceed. The number that's in there is a placeholder, it does not say not to exceed. So, if it said not to exceed, I'd have a much easier time swallowing it. I will lock arms and I will do everything I can to get a campus built with a brand-new library. I will guarantee you that. But I don't see the need for us to do this inside the levy especially, but I personally don't see the need for us to build a library right now and spend the funds right now. So if this is something that I need to vote on tonight and determine which is the best funding source, I would say that we should do a debt exclusion, let the voters decide if they want their taxes to be raised in order to do this, then we can make that determination. So I mean, I'm not gonna beat a dead horse, but that's exactly how I feel. I've felt that way all along. I think I've been clear and honest with you, and I support the third option. If we're gonna put anything forward, that would be the only option that I would potentially vote for.
Jeez. So Chuck, you just laid out what I think is a perfect reason to go with option B, which is that by May, we're in a position right now where we could do, if we went with option C, the library goes outside of the levy, then we have other things that come up that also need to go outside of the levy. Two things outside of the levy that add up to the same dollar value are perceived very, very differently than one larger number outside of the levy. So the point being, if we go with option B, that also allows us to have time to say, okay, we've got 7.7 million that's potentially outside of the levy if we go forward with the library. That also gives us the opportunity to say, you know what, Tom, 7.7 is the library number, but we actually also think we're gonna need 3 for choose your project. And so that allows us the time and opportunity to go to the voters with a comprehensive plan, a comprehensive solution outside of the levy, rather than doing it piecemeal. I don't see anything in option 2, in the wording of option 2, that would prevent us from packaging it together with other projects. So the fact that we do have some things coming down the line, to me, is yet another argument to do option 2.
Joe, if I may.
Please.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Chase.
Yeah, no,
So one thing and I forget who made the comment. Our finance team told us in 2014 that the library project needed to be funded outside the levy. And it does have been a pretty consistent message since 2014. That's just one remark. To Chase's point regarding a more comprehensive package to the townspeople in May, we won't be there. We won't be ready yet. The library projects, you've been working on this project since, what, 2015? 10 years.
10 years.
Right?
It depends on your definition of working on it.
Well, I
That's the
mean-
tricky part, right? How long have we been trying to get a senior center?
No, but you
Since
had-
2002.
No,
The
but,
same, it was talked about at the same time the
10 years
library
ago.
project started, so.
so 10 years ago. But as far as you had a design, you hired an OPM, that was not too long ago, right?
That was when we did when we applied for
The
the
grant application went in January.
Yeah, prior to the grant application, you had all that. How, so it was, I don't know, it was
Site selection.
2 or 3 years ago, you had the site, whatnot. We're not gonna be ready in May to bring forward the space needs for this building, the senior center. We're not gonna have all that information in May. I wish we would, honestly, that was my hope. And Mark and I talked about this many times. I said, we gotta bring everything together, across the finish line together, and it didn't work out that way, and here we are today, unfortunately. And to Chase's point, that would be ideal if that was gonna be feasible in May, but it's not gonna be feasible in May.
But the language of this, though, says that we will bring a debt, Prop 2.5 debt exclusion to the voters. So it,
No, but as far
doesn't
as
say
being
we'll
able to
bring it in
paint
May.
a bigger picture, being able to paint that picture more inclusively in May, we're not gonna have all of that information. To Mike Prue's point, there are other smaller needs in the community. You know, and to Alan, that summary, because you've been around a lot longer than I have, as far as town government goes.
Sidestep there.
That was enlightening to me, because you've seen what the town has gone through, especially with the funding choice that was made for the high school and the implications from that choice. Do we want to go there again? I mean, our town is growing, it's booming. And there's strain on our fire department, our police department, our highway department. We're not seeing the commercial growth that we saw with the Point. We don't have another Point in the pipeline. I would love for us to have another hotel, that would really help. But we don't have a lot of commercial growth, hence the need for the sewer project to revitalize the common, hence the need that we're looking at the Littleton Station. We're just trying to balance out our commercial growth and our residential growth so that we can have the things that we want. The bottom line is the best things for Littleton aren't free, and I've always said that. The library is gonna be awesome. It's really gonna be a focal point for the town. No question whatsoever that it could be a centerpiece for us and a benefit to our community. That being said, we have to be responsible and think about how we're gonna pay for it. No one's debating whether or not we need the library. It's just about what's the most responsible way to fund it, is the question, and it's our responsibility, as a few people have said, to make that decision, but we need to make a decision based on what's best for the entire town, with the information that we have before us. It's not pitting projects against each other. We have a lot of information that's been given to us tonight. We have to look at it inclusively and take into consideration everything that we have before us when we make this decision. So, that's all.
So, board, we've heard plenty of discussions. We're gonna go on this, there's only 4 of us.
Right.
I got a feeling it's not gonna be,
Majority.
yeah, majority of 4-0 or 3-1.
Right.
Well, we don't need to assume, we need a majority of who's present, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. That's the problem.
For placing the article or on the warrant. To put a question on the ballot, you would need a 2/3 majority of whoever is present.
I mean, it's the same number either way, right? You need 3.
Need for
So, I guess my question is, This
Oh,
evening,
two-thirds, okay.
if it goes with option 2 or option 3,
Yeah.
they would need a 2/3 majority of who's present, probably at that future time.
When it actually, okay, yes.
So it's, it's majority.
You're looking to the ballot question, right?
I'm thinking it through. If there was a scenario by which, a majority of the board wished to put either 2 or 3 on the warrant, and that wasn't able to be supported by a ballot, a future ballot vote as well, then I don't know how that plays out. But as far as tonight's decision is concerned, technically, you need a majority of members present to decide between options 1, 2, and 3.
Can I ask a point of clarification on option 2? If, depending on the wording, through you to council, depending on the wording on how you're going for the override in the future, you can make it binding or non-binding, right? You can say you shall have an override, or you may have an override, and that would change what you needed for a majority at the time that you're doing the ballot. You could delay the point where you had to do the majority for the ballot portion, or the supermajority, whatever it is.
We're not actually, sorry, I don't want, I guess one clarifying point to what Mark's question, I think, is, we're not actually voting tonight. By choosing options 1, 2, or 3, technically, it doesn't invoke, none of that invokes the 2/3 majority required to place a question on the ballot, technically. They are related to one another, but they don't invoke that 2/3 requirement tonight.
So for clarity, when does that get, if you vote one way tonight and the 2/3 doesn't happen at a later meeting, what happens to the vote tonight?
That's a great question.
Since the warrant closes and it goes to print on Thursday, isn't that rather important?
Well, the warrant, the election question doesn't get placed at a later date. The ballot question doesn't get placed until a later date. Certainly, it could be technically placed today. That is another option. We do have language. If the board wished to place it today, that's also an option. Once, there are details that we should get into if we're going in that direction. But I would defer to town council to what happens if you place option 2 or 3 and then you don't have a 2/3 majority when.
Right, so I mean, I think that it's a very good point for people to understand that one scenario that could happen if you go with option 2, notwithstanding that town meeting says, it's our expectation that this will be put on the ballot, that doesn't force the selectmen to vote later by supermajority to put it on the ballot. So it could be, option 2 could result in a situation where it's never put to the voters. So I just wanted, depending on a future board of selectmen vote.
So that would mean that the project goes forward.
Under the levy, because it was not, it's not contingent on the Prop 2 vote.
How does that end up happening, though, if we've got 2 folks who would prefer to, based on my web count, 2 folks who would prefer to see it outside of the levy right now, and 2 folks who want to go forward with a vote? Looks to me like we would have 4 people who would want to see it on the ballot if it passed the town meeting. I mean to speak for you guys, but it seems pretty straightforward to me.
If we go with outside, there will be a ballot vote.
Right, there's got to be, right, or it doesn't get funded. That's right. And option 2, practically speaking, if it passed at town meeting, I don't see how anyone would vote not to put it on the ballot.
If I may, I think that's right, but I just want to be clear that
Practically speaking,
hypothetically,
right.
if you could all change your minds, and, that could happen. Just from a legal perspective, that would be a legal outcome that could happen.
Well, there may be a different makeup of a board at that time also.
Not in May.
No, not in
Probably
May.
not, but
It could be sooner than May, Mark.
I might, I can't help myself, I have to say this. If you're leaning towards option 2, as a way to make this kind of look like it's good for both sides of the question. It's not, because option 2 is a false choice. When you get town vote to do the library, and with an expectation that we're going to vote on how to pay for it in the future, everybody knows, it's been said here before, everybody knows that, okay, we're going to have a library, because unless you get a bunch of folks out there voting to do an exclusion, and who's going to go out there and vote to raise their taxes if they know they still get the library, whether they vote yes or no? The only real choice the citizen has is option 3. Debt exclusion or not a debt exclusion.
So we're gonna go from here.
Still has some hands, I don't know if you want to vote for
I think we're gonna stick it with the blue line regulation.
So, where do we go?
Just for a point of clarity, you're voting, you're not voting on which one you support, you're voting on what to include in the warrant.
Right, which option?
Just making sure I understand that.
I think that if, at this point, based on all the discussion, someone could make a motion for one option and see where it falls. I mean, I think the count is probably, I'm interpreting the same thing Chase is interpreting, but you might have to go through the iterations to see if something passes.
What do we do if we hit a crossroads and nothing passes? Where do we go from there? So we don't, to Mark's point, we don't have 48 hours.
A good question, does it still get put on the,
No, I mean, you need it, to put an article on the warrant, you need a majority vote to take that
So
affirmative action.
if we stalemate, this will not be on the
At all.
fall time.
On the
Correct.
fall town meeting, but still make sure.
You lose the grant, right?
this is, maybe his attendance is mighty important right now.
And then lose the grant.
When does the warrant have to go to print?
Thursday.
The town meeting report has to go to print Thursday morning, and the town meeting report obviously includes the warrant. The warrant isn't as time-sensitive ironically right now, but the two are inseparable.
We don't have 48 hours to post.
This one.
The sewer is a blank check.
I think you closed deliberation, Dave. We closed it.
When you say the warrant isn't as time sensitive, what does that mean?
That means that the warrant has to be posted 14 days prior to the town meeting by law, but our bylaws specify that the report must be mailed to residents before 14 days. So because of the lead time required for the printing of the report, it technically requires more lead time than the warrant. But again, since the language in the warrant is the same language that's contained in the report, they can't be.
Deadline's the same.
Right, the deadline is the same. So, one other thing which I don't necessarily think would solve anything is the option to make this article more general and not identify whether it's within the tax levy, outside the tax levy, or debt exclusion vote, that's optional.
Can I interrupt you? I think we've been presented with some options, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think where you're going down is just to be a little more vague, and I think we've heard tonight that it's kind of incumbent upon us to
Just
make
give
a
it, yep,
determination. I
totally the
appreciate
board's
that, but-
decision, yep,
When's it go to print?
this Thursday morning.
We don't have 48 hours to post.
We should have wrapped last night.
If Paul showed up right now, could he break this? I mean, if Paul walks in the door right now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, I mean, he can participate in voting, absolutely, if he showed up, yep.
He's not here for a reason.
Want me to text them, put everything else up on?
I did. I didn't realize that, I should have been kinder to him, didn't realize the seriousness of why he wasn't here. But he did ask if he came in to vote. Would it be valid by me?
Yep.
Yeah, just like any other meeting we walk in late to, we don't have to have a deliberation in order to.
What was that?
I'd make a motion that, so, you gonna try to reach out to him, or?
Don't know right now.
Mr. Chair, may I,
We're not taking any more deliberation, Michael.
it's unrelated.
If I open it up, Mike, then someone else is gonna start.
I was just gonna, put a plug in for Oktoberfest.
He did, and his response to me was, can I walk in and vote, and then walk out?
Right,
And I told him yes and haven't heard from him. So my suggestion would be that we finish up the rest of our business and then.
I agree. So what other articles we have?
I don't, it depends at this point as to whether or not the board would like to go into detail on any other article. But I think generally speaking, everything, we went through articles, we went through all the articles at the very start of this meeting. I don't know of any specific concern or otherwise question on other articles, so if I knew of one, I would go directly to that article and suggest we discuss it. But we've touched on all the more complicated articles and larger, more significant articles. At this point, if the board's prepared to go through, we could place and recommend and or not recommend any article. So I think the best way to start is there any article anyone wants to hold out? That's the simplest way to deal with it potentially. Is there any article anyone wishes not to recommend outside of the articles? Articles 10 through...
Mr. Sanders, hope this is quick, so we can...
I want to know why the board hasn't asked the treasurer, who's a key person in this town, with regard of any input that he has to give you with regards to this library, where it should be inside or out. I mean, he got a lot of thinking experience here. He's a key person in this town here. I would like to hear what he has to say.
He's already made his point, and...
I didn't hear it. What about it?
I asked if he wanted to, I'm trying to stay away from the library because I cut everyone else off. And he's already made his point in the past.
Well, and to just elaborate on that, just, Mr. Chairman, to the chairman's point, the treasurer and finance director had put a memo together that was presented, I believe, 2 regular meetings prior and discussed at length, just to supplement what you stated.
We're ready to make a motion?
I'm not. Are we gonna finish doing the other business or no?
No, I think
Okay.
Did you see the 3 options?
I think we should continue
Did
doing.
you see the 3 options? One is under the levy, one is, A is not subject to a debt exclusion, 2 is optional debt exclusion, that is, it goes in under the levy, and then we have a ballot vote later to determine whether we want to take it outside, and option 3 is outside at time. We are deadlocked 2-2, and without a majority, can't put it on the warrant.
2-2 for which 2?
Option 2 and option 3.
Well, I'm not gonna be of much help, because I'm option 1. This is a farce, and the town deserves better. It's a circus. it should be not subjected to a debt exclusion. And I'd move that we just go forward with the town's wishes and approve the library and put it under the levy limit, as has been overwhelmingly expressed by the town. And I've never seen this kind of circus stuff about motions for a town meeting warrant article before, and I'm embarrassed that our town government has put us in this position. So I would move option one, thank you.
At the risk of opening this back up to debate, Paul, I understand your point, I share your point, I agree. One is the right choice. If you and I both think it should be under the levy, option two still accomplishes that.
No, what that does is confuses the voters. It has been promoted by people who are not in favor of the library and will not be voting for the override that they want to put out there. And it just serves to muddy the waters and put the library at risk, and I think that's beneath the town.
So you're not gonna vote on anything else?
Made a motion, I'm just waiting to see if it's been seconded.
As we do move on. It's not gonna be. The problem I see now is that, does that mean it doesn't go on the warrant at all?
If the board can't decide on an option, then yes, that would be the conclusion. The board has to, in other words, another way to state it is the board has to place the article if it's to go on the warrant. No one else has that authority.
The only rational and logical position to go forward here is option two. It's the only one that allows each person to express their opinions at the ballot. And
I agree.
I would move that the Board of Selectmen place option two in the associated wording on the October 28, 2019 special town meeting warrant.
Do I have a second?
You may have to do it yourself, too.
Can the chair second it?
Yeah.
I second it. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. What, option two?
Yep.
The more embarrassing votes I've ever had to make? Aye. Good night.
Those opposed?
I'm opposed.
Opposed?
All right. Then it's B.
I think that was kind of a farce, calling him to come back in for a vote, then we knew where he was at. I really do. I think that was a farce, bringing him in like that, calling him in. We should have taken the vote.
I disagree.
No, he made a point of not being here for a reason. So, if he thinks it's a farce, it's on him just as much as anyone else.
Right, moving on.
I don't know if there's any kind of dispute that I can put up for that vote, calling somebody from within the meeting and bringing them back. I don't know, Rebecca, if you could counsel me there, but I think that was, I don't want to call it a legitimate
Yes, the
vote.
question is whether everything was, your question, I think, is whether everything in that vote was legal. Is that correct?
Yeah, taking time out, suspending the vote, waiting until he comes down.
I can't see a reason why it wasn't myself.
Yeah, I can't, right, I mean, the chair can run the meeting, I don't want to throw you to the bus job, but the chair can run the meeting however he wants, and it's not, at a public hearing, you know, it's different, people have to have been there for the deliberation, but I can't think of a reason that it wouldn't be legal.
And the chair can second a motion.
The chair can second.
That's just been our practice, that we haven't done that.
Right.
Chairs can also make motions, correct?
Yes. I mean, yeah, unless they've adopted different specific rules, which, yeah.
Okay, what else do we have?
So I guess I would direct everyone's attention to the screen and look at the list. Specifically, we haven't voted to place articles at this point 1 through 9. We haven't voted to place 14 through 17, and we haven't made a recommendation on a number of the different articles.
You know, just for the public, I know we've had correspondence, there's information in our packet. Could you just spend 2 minutes and outline the process associated with Article 17, the zoning amendment, marijuana retail?
Yes. And perhaps, I mean, I will do the simplified version.
Yeah,
perhaps.
Cliff's Notes, 60 seconds.
And if I misstate anything, I'm sure that town council will diligently correct me. So the Cliff Notes are...
Excuse me, if you're gonna talk, please go outside.
The Cliff Notes are that the town has the Board of Selectmen have a responsibility to notify the planning board within 14 days of receiving a zoning amendment as by citizens petition. The board did that through an email that I sent to the planning board on September 26th. Now the planning board has 65 days to act on a hearing. They must hold a hearing within 65 days. That 65 days period begins September 26th. 65 days clearly extends beyond October 28th. So it is entirely possible that the planning board's hearing could take place before town meeting, or it could take place after town meeting. In any event, the planning board must hold a hearing. They also are to provide a report. So assuming they publish notice within the prescribed requirements, they hold a hearing, and they prepare a report for town meeting all before October 28th, then the zoning amendment can move forward at town meeting. If not, town council would advise to the moderator that the article is out of order because those prescribed statutory requirements have not been met. If, for some reason, the town moderator doesn't call it out of order and it gets voted, then the Attorney General's office it's expected or anticipated that the Attorney General's office will not approve the bylaw because the statutory requirements were not met. So we know what happens if the planning board does not act on it before town meeting. Essentially, if it fails, it's not possible to move forward. Now let's entertain the scenario of what happens if the planning board does take those actions and steps before October 28th. If they do all of those things, they hold their hearing, they provide a report to town meeting, then at that time, town meeting can act on it, and if it passes by 2/3 majority, then it would be in the Board of Selectmen's ballpark. The Board of Selectmen would have to decide whether or not to put the question before the voters on a ballot. The language contained in the zoning article is not, as it relates to putting it on the ballot, is non-binding. Only the Board of Selectmen in this case can put a question on the ballot. So if the Board of Selectmen decides to put the question on the ballot, and it passes by majority vote at the ballot, then, assuming all those steps are taken, that basically means town meeting voted to rescind the aspects of the zoning bylaws that relate to retail marijuana. That also means that the election decided to confirm that language being rescinded. And at this point in time, if there are applicants that have filed for a special permit or gone through HCA negotiations, their application would be at risk, essentially, throughout this entire process. And if all of those checks occurred, then By the end of the process, any applicant that's gone through the process, the effective date would be the date of the planning board's notice in the newspaper. So everything gets retroactively applied back to that date if all those steps pass. And I think the bottom line conclusion is that any applicant going through the process at this time technically is in risk of this process being ultimately a zoning out retail marijuana.
I just want to add one thing, which I think you all are clear on, that the statute requires you to place, regardless of all of that, which was very correctly stated, the statute requires you to place the article on the warrant. The statute regarding petition articles to town meeting.
And if I can ask you, Anna, it's on your agenda to vote on it tomorrow, is that?
Correct. Just to schedule the hearing date. I believe the vote is just to schedule the hearing date.
Right.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Thank you for clarifying.
So we still have to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
9,
9. Okay.
14, 15, 16, and 17.
Mr. Chair, you ready for a motion on those?
Yes, I am.
Move that the Board of Selectmen put special town meeting articles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, as numbered in our packet on the October 28, 2019 special town meeting warrant.
Didn't we already vote? Didn't we just vote 13?
Oh, I'm sorry. Amend that motion, take Article 13 off that list.
This is to place the articles, sorry, there should be a second before we discuss.
Yeah, second.
This is, just to clarify, this is to place the articles on the warrant, is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. Would the board be willing to make an amendment to that motion just to provide for the town administrator and town council the opportunity to make any necessary clerical changes to the warrant?
Yes, in addition to amending my motion to strike Article 13, which has already been added, I'd like to add to it that my motion would also authorize town council and the town administrator to jointly make any necessary clerical changes to the warrant and to direct the constable to post said warrant. Did I get what you needed?
Is that
Yeah,
okay?
that's good, because we've already voted the other one, so, yep.
Is that a motion?
That's my amended motion.
All right, perfect, second.
Motion's been made, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Rebecca, on the, so if they come up with a date tomorrow night for when they're going to have their hearing, and that date is basically.
It's after town meeting, or sorry.
Is after town meeting.
Yep.
And if we do enter into an agreement with somebody prior to them having their hearing, that would be grandfathered. But if we don't,
No, well,
the license has to be issued by the state.
What is or isn't grandfathered specifically is the special permit that they're gonna need. So because the current zoning bylaw, well, it can only be, a retailer can only be located by special permit in the town. The current zoning bylaw provides, a way for that to happen. So if someone signs an HCA, then they're gonna have to go apply for a special permit. And so the only thing that would be grandfathered is anyone that had a special permit, because this is a zoning bylaw, that's the thing that gets grandfathered or not, is the special permit that's issued under the zoning bylaw. Someone would have to have their special permit in hand before the notice is published, so I assume no one's at that. I assume that's.
No, we haven't even negotiated
Yeah,
an
yeah,
agreement
so,
with anybody yet.
so basically, none of the current applicants then would be grandfathered regarding this.
And it's based upon, so that's what it's based upon. Planning board's special permit,
Right.
not licensing from the.
Correct, exactly. Yep, they could, yep. They could get all the other approvals necessary, but then they wouldn't be able to get that one.
But a planning board special permit could not be issued before an HCA, so it's.
Right.
Right.
But the, so that 17 is on the warrant.
And
So
you
it's all a
sh-
matter of that's up or down at town meeting before that all kicks in.
Assuming that the planning board holds a hearing and submits a report, yes.
So
Right,
that, if
town
that
meeting
fails at
kills
town
it,
meeting.
the
it
whole
doesn't-
thing about it.
Right, either if the planning board doesn't hold their hearing and issue their report before town meeting, or if it fails at town meeting.
Or if the Board of Selectmen doesn't place the
Doesn't put it
question on the ballot.
Or if it fails at the ballot.
Correct.
A lot of things could
Yeah.
shoot it down.
I just want to make that
Yep.
clear, because there are some folks that put a lot of time, effort, and energy into getting us to where we're at. I'm not necessarily just talking about those of us on this side of the table, but the folks that have put time, effort, energy, and resources into applying. Just so they'll understand as well.
Okay.
Okay, so at this point, it would be beneficial to either, to go through the warrant and decide if there are articles that the board is prepared to recommend, or if the board wishes to provide its recommendation at town meeting, on the town meeting floor. So going back to the list of articles,
So again, you need this for the report.
yes.
You don't need to know who it's assigned to, as far as who's going to.
No, in fact, I'm striking that section of the assignment, because I think we can deal with that another day. The 7th would be just fine for that. So Article 1, since the article has changed, that's one that I would ask you to vote on. I'm just going to go through a list here, and so if someone else would write this down with me. Article 2, you've already, in material part, supported that, but if you wish to ratify it again, because we've had some mathematical numbers that have changed, again, that's just administrative, but that's your choice. So at a minimum, Article 1, Article 3 you've already supported, Article 4 you've already supported, Article 5 you've supported, Article 6 you've supported, Article 7 you've supported, Article 8 needs to be added, Article 9 you've already supported, Article 10, I assume you'll want to skip over that and address that at a later time, considering all the discussion. Same with Article 11, correct me if I'm wrong with my assumption. Article 12, with regard to the Board of Water Commissioners, you've already voted to support that. Article 13, I'm not sure how the board would like to move forward with whether or not to support that at this time or not. So I'll put that as a question. Article 14, you've already voted to support that. Article 15, you've already voted to support that. 16, you've supported that. 17 is in question.
No action.
No action.
Okay, so really, when I boil it down, it's 1, 8 that I would recommend you vote on. 14, that's not, did I say 14?
You said we already voted that.
I meant 13.
It's library.
Sorry, I meant 13, library.
And you said we may want to recommend Article 2 again because there've been minor mathematical changes?
Yeah,
Is that
if
right?
you'd like. I mean, it's purely based on your comfort level of the, I would consider those clerical or mathematical, but it's purely based on your comfort. You could do 1, 2, 8. I assume you may or may not be prepared to vote 13 or 17, but I think that's what remains.
17 we're going to take no action on, correct?
Correct.
Do you have a preference on how that's worded? The Board of Selectmen decided not to take any action, or Board of Selectmen will provide that's not into, preference on
Do you
how
have to
that's
say
worded?
anything?
You don't have to say anything.
No, you don't have to do anything. No, we can just remove it altogether.
I mean, each individual member of the board can speak as a resident on that if they want
Certainly,
to, but.
certainly.
So obviously, the question is, are we voting about whether we support 13 or not? I think Article 1 and 8 are perfunctory and administrative.
Well, I had down 10, 11, and 13, we haven't
Oh, I guess
voted on, right?
Yes, and I kind of assumed that the board
Yeah,
was,
I'm not ready to support 10 or 11 yet, so.
All right. Yeah, I had that we put those on hold.
Yeah.
As far as voting on those. And then, no action on 17, so it was 1, 2, and 8, Nina?
1, 2, and 8, yep.
That required a vote of the board.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to support Articles 1, 2, and 8 as printed in our draft town meeting warrants for the October 28th, 2019 special town meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Okay. And so we'll just keep,
That's really all that requires your attention today, unless you wish to go over descriptions or modify any descriptions. That's the only thing we haven't touched on.
Did you guys take a vote on 13, as to whether or not to support it?
They are
Or they
going to
just
hold
do
off.
no action?
Yeah,
yeah.
We have a meeting, a joint meeting tomorrow night with planning board, is that right?
you do, yes. Mainly for us is the Cooper Farm Estates.
But you're welcome to stay for all of it.
I am fine, close the door now. The door's wide open, that's all fine.
The other piece that we had discussed at the start of this meeting, or towards the beginning of this meeting, was setting a date to discuss and approve the amendments or motions to be presented at town meeting. Does the board wish to set a date now, or would the board like me to send out some date options in the future? And I think more importantly, the question is, what is the deadline that we expect? That's really the question that comes into play, because then that would dictate the date of our meeting, which would be that same day or the day after.
What are our meeting dates going forward?
The only regular meeting date we have for the month of October is October 7th.
Okay.
I had the fortune of receiving a scholarship for conference. I will be at a conference from Saturday the 19th to Wednesday the 23rd.
Someplace fun and warm?
Warm, yes. Fun, depends on what happens here during that time.
I don't have my calendar in front of me. What's the week in between?
So we have the
14th?
Yep,
Oh, sorry.
I mean, not that tells you. So Columbus Day is the Monday.
that's right.
Oh, is Columbus Day the 14th? No.
It is, yep.
Yes.
Oh, it's the 14th this year?
Yes. Second Monday.
Yeah, I know, it's weird, isn't it?
So you said the 19th to the 23rd?
That's right.
25th.
Oh, you are here still.
Thank you. Friday the 25th?
I just went outside to yell.
I can't do the 25th. My mother's having surgery.
Serious? 25th morning.
I mean, she's 80, so yeah.
A breakfast, well,
It's true, though.
That has to be joint too, I think. Well, we're gonna have to meet. Oh, we can meet right before town meeting, I think, vote.
so your mom's having surgery, Chuck?
Yeah, no, yeah. You guys are welcome to
Oh, we could,
assign me to whatever you want to assign me to.
what do you got going on Tuesday? Get something that
We
day.
could probably do the assignments on the 7th.
Yeah.
But as far as the decision of finalizing and voting the language to go on the amendment sheets, it's
Oh.
essentially an amendment to the warrant, to the report.
Actually, I prefer you guys do it on the 25th.
I may not be here on the 7th.
We know which ones to
Yeah,
assign you to.
we got it covered for you.
Okay.
We got you.
Um,
So
I can
the
make it work, whatever the board decides.
morning or
for
evening of the
assignments.
25th?
I'm out all day.
25th is all good for me.
It is,
25th is.
in the morning?
Yeah, especially the earlier the better, but,
Okay. So let's do the morning of the 25th?
although we seem to get in trouble with Friday morning early meetings.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I just want to note, like, some of those motions are going to take a lot of discussion. It's not going to be a perfunctory meeting, I just want to note that.
You can see Rebecca already drafting them in her head.
Well, I mean, there's going to be a lot of policy decisions for you all to make, and I think that, because a number of the articles were left fairly general for the warrant, and there's going to be a lot of detail in the motion, so.
This one.
So I just need to be at work by 8:30 on the 25th.
So we have a, we meeting
You're up.
Why can't you be? She's calling me out.
I don't know.
Oh, who's?
What day is that? I didn't-
usually the
Did you?
Friday before.
Oh, it is? We can do it on Thursday.
Do it on Thursday. Yeah, I'm okay with it on Thursday, it's Friday.
Well, the challenge may be that you don't have the library information by then, and I suppose there's a scenario by which we get the library information on the 24th, at the end of the day, on the 24th, and then the problem is you can't, if you're meeting on the evening of the 28th, we won't be able to print out the information. I guess the question is there an expectation for the so let's parse things for a moment. Let's say that we have all of the articles, the information for all of the articles except for the library article by the 24th. And we have the library article information by 11:59 PM on the 24th. So we won't have taken it up if we meet on the 24th. The library article, if it doesn't have to be in writing, I mean, we certainly have to provide a motion in writing in some way, but if it doesn't have to be in a document that gets printed and is available for everyone to hold on to at town meeting and can be presented on a projector, which I'm not aware of any town bylaws that require the language to be printed on a piece of paper and be able to be picked up by residents. Theoretically, it could be presented that evening.
Well, we're going to meet
Library.
the 25th though, right?
Well, the discussion that was just being had was to potentially have the meeting on the 24th.
Oh, I thought the 25th.
I mean, if listen,
Mistake.
I'm gonna guess that if we do it the evening of the 24th and we say we're gonna have the architect's number on the 21st.
I like where you're going with this.
And if these guys really wanna build a $14 million building, I'm pretty sure they're gonna find a way to get it to us by 6:30.
I like where you're going. Yep.
Okay,
The 24th.
the 24th.
6:30 PM?
Sounds good.
All right.
So the deadline is no later than.
Could Steve still here? So, would you mind to just let Steve
Not a problem.
know?
Yep.
Communicate that and start leaning on people now.
Okay.
Okay.
6:30 PM the day after.
6:30 PM on October 24th.
All right. Anything else?
Before we adjourn, Mike Prue did bring up the Oktoberfest, but I just want to put that out there, that Oktoberfest is this Saturday at Bay Park. A lot of time and effort and energy has been put into it by a number of different folks. The folks from the pub are using their serve safe to.
Yeah.
They've really done a lot of heavy lifting.
A lot of people are talking about it.
They really
Should
have,
be good.
yeah, so it's bebop bands and all kinds of cool Oktoberfest kind of stuff. So it's at Bay Park on Saturday, the 5th, so.
And the hours?
Have fun.
Mike?
10 a.m.?
10 a.m.?
Yeah.
And I would say arrive early because parking can be,
Parking is at the church, 300 King Street, one side of the
Next to
Foster
the
Street, which is next to the
Historical Society
Bay Park, and then parking here.
and at Bartlett's house.
There is handicapped and senior parking, I believe, at the fire station out behind.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Almost like somebody.
I was paying attention.
You are.
I was listening.
Anything else here?
impressive.
Vote to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you all for watching.
Oh, you dropped your. Hi.